All right. So I'm so glad you're okay, Tyler. You just came in when we were introducing our faith and what they wanted to get out of this particular episode. I did see that you were trying to dig into it. I have, oh my God, I went into so many show notes here that I didn't even give to you guys yet. So you guys are going to get a little bit of surprise today. But I'll open it to you.
I was praying for you, Tyler.
I was too.
Thank you, Ryan.
Ryan's just copying me because I said it first in our chat. He wants to be a good guy too. I see the light in you, Ryan. Don't worry.
Your prayers mean nothing without your thoughts.
That was going to be my question. I mean, did
He wants to be a
Ryan
good
really
guy,
pray
too.
for you, or did he feel for you?
I see the light in you, Ryan.
What's the difference?
Don't worry.
Well, for a Christian,
Your prayers
prayers are much bigger, right? So, like, and Christians, by the way, are guilty of this, where they meet somebody and they tell them about their bad circumstances, and that Christian says, "I'm going to pray for you." Now, I think a lot of the Christians I hang out with go home and actually do pray. They talk to their children. And they say, "Hey, we have a friend in need. Let's all pray for better being," right? And we're actually hoping for some type of supernatural intervention there. Versus when you say, "I'm praying for you," right? Because you're not Christian. You're really just feeling for him, going, "I feel you," and I'll go home still feeling for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I feel the reason I kind of made that comment about what's the difference. I still think there fundamentally isn't much of one at the end of the day. I think we both are just hoping that circumstances improve, and one of us is, or one party is expecting supernatural interference, and one party is, expecting to rely more on natural interference or lack thereof.
I get that. All right, so Taylor, we still haven't gotten your introduction yet.
Tyler, you mean?
Maybe he
How
hit
hard
his
did you hit your head? Yeah.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I'm still setting up the live. I just jumped in here. I'm setting up all my links and sending them all out and everything. Sorry. What do you mean my introduction as to like what I'm more here to scrutinize. I was kind of hoping to see, like, I was reading some of the passages that you were throwing at us and kind of trying to get through. There's a lot in there. You were talking about different parts of the Bible, particularly Enoch being involved because it's written in Arabic. It's considered less authoritative, but then the Ethiopian church kept it alive. And I'm kind of wondering what your guys' argument is there, juggling these different passages, and if it's divine, why isn't it all divine, and who makes that choice, and if that's the case, like maybe there's redundancies being left out, and maybe there's inaccuracies or things like that. There's also like, does that even, I was kind of saying this last week, does that even, like, if there are people putting up fake scripture, does that even invalidate the other scripture because maybe they just were opportunists that saw, and maybe I want to get my name in history, and this is obviously like biblical scripture, let me try to put something in to get my name as one of the authors as well. So I don't know, I'm just kind of curious to hear as to where we go. And again, I'm the skeptic here, so in a way I'm trying to have you guys sell it to me as to why this divinity exists within the Bible. So I'm just kind of, I don't know. I've heard on I went and did a lot of listening to different arguments in the past on this particular question, and it seems a lot of it is that napkin I posted the other day, where it's like, the Bible says it's divine, so it is divine. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious as to where we go.
No, that's
Yeah.
brilliant. By the way, so it was a 1 minute introduction of what side you're on, which you made apparent, and what you wanted to get out of this. Before you got here, I actually did bring up your napkin. By the way, just so you know, I also did make a covenant to people like you that I'm going to tell my inconsistencies of the Bible as well, truthfully and honestly. I mentioned that my faith is unshakable. However, sometimes my reading, I go, I don't understand this. So that's a good introduction. It is perfect because I really do believe that I looked into these things and we have the opportunity to address them. Um, and I think we did last episode with some of the canon. I want to try to go through the canon, but most of the stuff I wrote to you guys is canon stuff. But going into your other questions in section 2 and section 3 of so this is the path I want to take on this particular discussion. I want to solidify the canons and the understanding of the canons. There still may be arguments in the end, but I think I have a pretty good argument. The canons are probably pretty correct, but we can debate. The next step I want to go into is does the Bible claim to be divine? Now, when I say does the Bible claim to be divine, that means the Bible by itself without people. Can I read the Bible and actually get a claim out of the Bible and what the Bible says of being divine? The third part and the final part is the Bible divine? And this is where we step outside of the Bible actually saying it's divine and looking at historical documents, looking at the whole like history that we have recorded and whether there's any evidence that maybe it can be divine. But I am going to take it a little bit in the abstract outside of that of looking at there's over 20,000 references between the books written in different times by different authors in different regions that all reference back and forth between each other. Like, so these are kind of more abstract things, but how could 40 books or 66 books, even more books, right? If we look at what's included or not, and all these different authors and all these different locations have such consistency between each other. And these are some of the logical things where you're like, if A and then B, right? This is more going to be in Ryan's realm where this almost seems like an impossibility. And the impossibilities of having this structure put together, even down to the, like psychology. If we look at psychology today, you can find every modern piece of psychology mentioned in the Old and New Testaments. And it's all new, like modern psychology where, hey, this is the best way to behave. And if you behave like this, you'll be happy. It's all a repeat of what the Bible was already saying. So these are the 3 sections I kind of want to go through. And very excited about that. But given that, we will bring up our guest panelists. And I'm going to try to make the show flow. He's going to probably do everything he can to make sure it doesn't. So with that, because I always like to bring in the controversy, right?
Cleaner's coming too, by the way.
Oh, that'd be great. I love Cleaner. And Cleaner,
Right
you know, he is, yeah, everybody knows Cleaner. So I'll give him an introduction when he shows up. So let me show this screen and then drum roll. Our special guest today, which everybody on the panel already knows because he's sitting backstage. If you guys like Lucky Charms in the United States, this would be his evil stepbrother. Welcome to the stream, Teriyaki.
Teriyaki.
I love you,
Like
Teriyaki.
I said, yeah, no, 100%. You need chaos, though. Like, you need to have Apollo, you need to have law and order, but you also need to have chaos. You know what I'm saying? So, like I said, it feels so empty without me, you know?
But I did learn from episode 1 I need to keep control of everybody. So if you start going off like you did on Sarah's channel into these like crazy diatribes, I'm just going to cut you off. I might mute you. I'm in control of this channel. I will only entertain good conversation. So
Yeah,
we love
100%.
you on here, but if you go too far off base, you're going to be cut. I won't cut
Yeah,
you.
100%.
I'm just going to mute you.
To establish all these boundaries just because
100%.
Teriyaki's here.
This is what I'm saying. Like I said, I'm here to represent because like I do disagree with Vybe, like fundamentally in terms of the whole Christian thing, but like I also disagree with Ryan as well. So like I said, I'm max chaos, baby.
Yeah, this is a good thing, and I don't mind talking a little bit of crap on Teriyaki because him and I actually converse quite a bit. I think we both know that we love the engagement, so I don't think there's any bad feelings on either side. At least I hope not.
Cleaner's
No,
in the back,
100%,
by
man.
the way.
All right, and then we've got our cleaner. Can you hear us,
How's it
sir?
going?
There we
Yes,
go.
indeed I can. How you doing?
Good, good, good.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much for coming, cleaner.
Sure thing.
Vybe and I were outnumbered for once.
I don't know. You may still be outnumbered with me here. You never know. We'll
This is
see.
true, and you know what? I'm actually going to say, cleaner. I took a note from you, and I did. I'm going to do it one more time. Sorry for the audience that I keep on doing it. Episode 1, I was trying to kind of placate both the atheists and the Christians because I wanted the atheists to watch, and I realized that that's not what anybody wants to see. They don't want to see somebody placating. I'm just going to tell the truth, and my truth is, as a Christian, I have run into some of the same things that the people that are going to be against me run or accuse me of, right? And you do such a good job debating. Where what I see when people debate is they're so stuck to winning the debate, they will not concede something they even know is wrong.
Yes,
And that actually
they go for victory instead of truth.
right. And I've seen you, cleaner, where you win by conceding what you know is wrong. You're a really good example of that. And as a Christian, like I'm watching that, I'm like, well, that's actually, why would I lie to defend? Like, if I don't know, why would I lie to defend my belief? I still believe what I believe because I have an unshakable faith. But why am I going to lie going, well, that's just fallacy? Why can't I just say, I don't know, or I concede? That is something I don't get. And that is something I will actually bring up in this particular episode as well. I can't find any evidence of Mary being a virgin birth. I mean, except for 2 gospels and something like that. And I'm going to concede to that. But I don't think it's actually relevant to the whole of everything. I think that's just a part of it, but it's something I can't prove. And that's going to have to just be something on my own faith. Maybe somebody else can come into this conversation and go, actually, I do have evidence, and maybe they can bring something in. I don't. That's something I will never be able to fight. That's not a battle I'm ever going to be able to win. But sometimes as a Christian, we go, I'm going to fight that battle. I'm going to fight you to the end.
I think that was a conversation you and I also had on a different channel in between these episodes, where, yeah, even I went and pulled the original wording and whatnot. And even if we took it as her being an unmarried young woman, for considering the time, that could have easily been a death sentence for her, being pregnant out of wedlock as a teenager. So, I don't think that it necessarily detracts from the message.
No, I don't think
Well,
it tracks in the end, and that was kind of my point. And I mean, there's 2 gospels or 2 testaments that actually mention that. The other 2 testaments do not. And I mean, God can do anything. A man could have gotten her pregnant, and it still could have been God's child, right? Like so this is something that is unprovable, something that I would have to remove from the conversation as being proof for God. However, I think there's other proofs as well. Therefore, I can actually concede not that she wasn't virgin, but just concede I don't know, if that makes sense.
Well, I think
As a virgin myself, I
Bible
can probably
does.
help figure it out.
Mary puts out. Let's be honest.
no, the
Bible
essence
does
to
have
it.
a couple of verses that talk about that, though. To be fair, I think it's like Luke 130 to 134, 135. They're talking about what was happening between Mary and the angel she was speaking to, and she had said, "But how can this be? How am I pregnant? I'm a virgin. Like, how's that possible?" And so, I mean, there's like references to it, but it also depends on which version of the Bible you're looking at, because some versions will actually say, how do I not, or how could I be pregnant since I do not know a man?" And some say, since I'm a virgin. So it depends on which Bible you're looking at, you know.
Well, that's a perfect opening for the beginning here. And just to address that particular item there, some of the things that I'm looking at and bringing in at the end here are actually stepping through history and things that are confirmed and provable. Um, and the Mary part, I have faith on, so I believe that is true, but that is only a belief, and I can't provide to Radical Coder or Tyler any proof of that, and I will not be able to ever provide any proof
I wouldn't expect you to.
outside.
The counter argument, because here's where I disagree with the likes of Ryan and temporarily, I'll say temporarily defend Vi's point of view, because the way I look at it is in terms of the noble eye aspect to it. It's irrelevant whether or not even God is real. It's the aspect of the morals that you learn from these stories. So, for example, no one's debating whether or not Loki's actually real, but there's a lot of truths that he can teach you through having the movie scripts, so on and so forth, and that's why religion has such a tight grip on it. But my counter argument to it would be, like I said, Void, that I view it as a noble lie. So it's like for the greater good, like we'll believe the quote unquote lie because there's truths that Jesus say on the mount, all this kind of stuff that we follow or we deem as the most productive for human flourishing.
I would say more that if you look through like anything that's been translated from anime subs to my wife speaks a different language than I do, so she comments to her family and I hit the translate button. We will look at the translations the AI does and laugh because they're nothing close to what she was actually saying. So translating from language to language to language that work different ways with different syntax can create these errors, and all you can do sometimes is assume the interpretation of the writer and try to best relay what they're saying. But even then, it's a giant game of telephone, even with the best faith interpretations of what you're trying to translate. So if there's some indiscrepancies, but they generally line up, I'm not going to ding you for anything silly like that. I don't. Well, this one says that she's never known a man. It doesn't actually say she's technically a virgin. So, boom, gotcha, checkmate. You know, it's that's fedora tipping levels anti-religion. So, yeah, I won't ding you for that personally.
All right, so I'm going to pause everybody there because I'm going to get into that, and we're going to get into that, and we're about to get into the debate, which is great. And I do actually have a lot of arguments against a translation of a translation of a translation, which is exactly what we're going to go into. But before we go into that, as I always do, we have to get a word from our sponsor. So, oh, shoot. Where is our sponsor? There it is. Almost there. All right. This episode of the Uncomfortable Bible Study is brought to you by Apocryphor Anonymous, the support group for all the books that just didn't make the cut. Are you feeling left out like the books of Enoch? Are you feeling like or misunderstood like Jubilees? Or maybe just tired of being called non-chronicle? Don't worry, you're not alone. The Apocryphor Anonymous, we offer safe storage, occasional citations, and the hope one day someone on YouTube will finally read you again. Call now and receive a free membership card, unless, of course, it gets voted out by the next council. Okay.
Just that point on Book of Enoch, because I actually done a series when I was starting the Theology Thursdays with it. One aspect to Enoch is that the fallen angels are the one that actually like taught like humanity all this like forbidden knowledge in terms of how to make weapons, how to make breastplates, how to do agriculture, all this kind of stuff. Like God was basically perceived to be that deity that wanted to keep humanity ignorant. This is why I point back to the story of Prometheus, which it mirrors Jesus' story in a lot of different ways, including his punishment, where he's like bound to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains. But the main point that it's like that I think the Bible is trying to get at is that you're supposed to turn away from God, that this is a rule that you don't want to do, because even when you look at the aspect of logic tells you what you shouldn't do or what is illogical, what is wrong. When you look at like things that are logical, that is correct. Do you know what I mean? And when you look at like how you're saying the words to get you back to your thing, just to be good faith, to tie you back to his translations and all this stuff, when you look at the original Greek, the word in John in the beginning was the logos. When you look at the likes of Heraclitus and how they describe logos, I could pull up a definition now. It's like it's the exact same thing. It's like the law that governs the cosmos, and like a lot of Christians would agree. That sounds like God to me. So that's why I was asking you like to begin with the definitions, because translations and semantics is the best place to start.
Yeah, and this is something really interesting, and I brought this up in episode 1. So all the quotes that I use in the Bible are going to be the NASB, which is the closest word-to-word translation that is in the English version, the most word-for-word translation from the original text. Now, there is the interlinear translation, which, by the way, has holes. Even in interlinear, they'll be like, we actually don't know what this word means. Or it'll give the exact word, which may not be the word that is used in things like the King James or NIV, and they may have several different translations. I've made several examples of this with, like, there's 2 versions of slave in the original versions, but we always use the word slave. There's 5 versions of love, but we always use the word love, right? So when we're really looking at this stuff, we're actually looking at, I'm really trying to look at the word for word. And there are some gaps in the interlineal. You'll see that there are particular words where we say, we're not sure because this language is so old, or this version of that language is so old, that it could have been this or that when we're translating that really old version. However, to go to Tyler's discussion of a translation of a translation of a translation, that's actually not happening much, in the sense that when we're translating from when we translated to the NIV or NASB, we're actually translating from the original version to the New American version. We're not going 5 different translations between. It's always from the oldest one we have, basically the interlinear translation, and just trying to make it a coherent sentence in English. So it's not a translation of a translation of a translation of a translation. It's very simple. And we have gotten older versions from previous versions, and the words are almost word for word, but they're not. The older we go, there have been slight inconsistencies between each version. And so, yeah, I argue against the translation of a translation of a translation of a translation. We're always getting closer and closer, but still not at the debate yet. Now we're going to go into the debate, and I'm going to rally for a little bit here. And I really wanted to put slides together and infographics and stuff like that. But what I'm just going to do is just share my notes. And I'm going to try to get through it as quickly as possible so we can actually get into it, so I don't go into a long diatribe here. So let me just share my notes here that I've been taking all week. So I did want to get through the canon, and I want to get through the canon as quickly as possible because there's a lot of debates here. And if anybody feels like there's a stopping, so I want you guys to just let me go until you feel like there's a stopping point where you say, actually, I'm gonna disagree with this and I want to fight this. So there's the Council of Nicaea, and a lot of people talk about that as being the Roman Empire deciding how they want to control their people, and that's how the books got put in and left out. Before we get into that, I actually want to go from the very, very beginning. So there were individual writings between 14th century BC to 4th century BC. These books were the Old Testaments, which gradually got written over 1,000 years. We have the Torah, we have history, we have poetry, prophecy. In here, really, I have included and excluded. However, we really didn't exclude anything yet because no canon had been actually made yet. But what was being worshipped at that time, which was creating the Jewish community, actually did have some sort of authority of saying, of these books that have no canon at all, of these writings that have no canon at all, which ones do we believe in? And these were things that were basically selected by what are all the communities of the Jewish nations all doing together, do they actually have prophetic authority? And here I have, thus says the Lord. And I put in a huge little section here about what prophetic authority is. And it goes much further into basically it's the words of the prophets say, and the prophets are only prophets if what they said and they prophesied are true. Therefore, you are disqualified if you say something and it doesn't become true. And it can't just be one thing. It's got to be multiple things. There's a lot of criteria behind that. So basically, we have the initial writings. There's no canon. Now we move on to the Torah was finally recognized. So basically, we had 1,000 years of people writing stories, singing songs, prophesizing, things like that, pre-Jesus, right? And at 400 BC, the Torah actually was recognized as being the first 6 books. They included Genesis, Exodus. You know, we know the first books. We did exclude some books, and this is where Enoch actually was excluded. Jubilees, they existed, but not as the Torah. And the event was by reading a reading by Ezra, right? I heard a yep, so I don't know if that was my first interruption there. Going, somebody wants to actually make a comment on that.
Yeah, just in terms of the Enoch stuff, like I think it was included because like Enoch literally gives you like the calendar and all this kind of stuff. It was like that was another aspect to a lot of these Bible stories. It's like when it's like mentions the Ark of the Covenant, it actually mentions how to build it and all this kind of stuff. So it's like this was basically like the internet almost in terms of the religion, all this kind of stuff. But just in terms of the date, I just want to know it's like that's in and around Plato's time, that whole 400 BC time period. Just letting everyone know.
Enoch.
Yeah, and it's good. And I actually want to put a pin in Enoch because I actually am going to address Enoch. There's several books that are left out, and we could spend the whole episode going through them. I don't think it's actually necessary, but I did want to point out, and you can see on my screen here, I had that one in red, specifically to put a pin in that particular one. But here we are going through the creation of what the modern day Christian Bible is, right? And so Enoch was excluded from the Torah. And then in 200 to 100, or 2nd century to 1st century before Christ, we've got the prophets and the writings, right? And so this is Psalms and Isaiah, Jeremiah, things like that. But there were things that were excluded. Still, Enoch is excluded. Jubilees was still excluded. Dead Sea Scrolls, which were also written around that time, they actually contain all of these books, but still, they were basing a criteria off of whether the people that were actually writing these books were prophets that actually were regularly circulated. And circulation is really important because if a book shows up, a part of the Christian faith, and it's in this town that's on the outskirts of all the other Christian towns, and they find this one book on this outskirt that has a couple names that just happen to be the same names as the people in that town, and it's dug up around the same era of the Christians, they can start looking at things going, does it fit? Does it have any relation to the prophecies? Does it have any of these things? Maybe this is going to be rolled out, which actually comes down to when we get to the Septuagint, which happened, by the way, prior to the Roman Council. This is the first legitimate Old Testament, where basically
one thing on that, all of this timeline you're looking at was not Christian.
Yes,
none of this was Christian.
We are pre-Christian.
Right. We're in the pre-Christian era. So when we're talking about this timeline, we would be talking about Hebrew or underlying Catholicism. I mean, that was forming, right? We wouldn't be talking about Christianity itself because there is a split between the religions later on that changes the definition of each of the religions and how they move forward in history.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, I think, right here is the biggest point right here, because this is the particular section where we actually define one of the Old Testaments, and then later the Hebrew Bible actually changes a little bit. But this is the one that the Christians accept. And as you said, even Muslim was formed after all of this. It was Muslim was formed after even Christ was born, right? So there's a lot of splits after this, but there is a basis here where we have the Word of God. We have things like Noah, which a lot of people don't like. We have things like slavery, which we don't like. Well, when I say we, I mean what we see in the modern world, right? I don't necessarily say we. And I'm just catching myself there. We don't like slavery. But what we see of the Old Testament, these are some of the things that people are against, right? So here at this point, we have an Old Testament that actually has been built. And it has been built off of a lot of kind of councils, but based on a decision. Actually, there were multiple councils here that were basing it off of, did we hear this? Does it fit? Is it not from an outside tribe? Did the person that's actually writing it or say it have some sort of authority based on what they said came true? So we have this whole scripture of books here rolled up here, and I think this is kind of a big turning point when we do start getting into what you were just talking about, Cleaner, the beginning of the splits, right? So even the Hebrew Bible was not actually put into their canon.
Or canonized.
The Old Testament canon. And we'll see it, that even the Hebrew Bible pretty much does the same thing as the original one, just ordered slightly different. They have 24 books, same as Protestants. They just combined them different, but they did exclude some books in there, right? And they had their criteria. Was it written in Hebrew, right? So they're Jews. They're like, hey, we are the chosen people. Why would God have them write it in another language outside of ours? Still needs to be inspired, still needs to be consistent. So does this story tell the same story? And we're going to see this replayed on the New Testament as well. Do we have consistency through the New Testament when we're trying to canonize that? So we haven't even canonized the New Testament yet. And we get to the Christian Old Testament, which is basically the supplicant. Sorry, I always stumble on this word.
Pause for just 1 second.
Yeah.
So this is all very interesting. I feel like I'm learning a lot, but I'm a little. Are we just kind of reviewing like a history of the Bible, and like I'm not educated enough to like argue on any of the historicity of any of these things.
I am.
Well, that's fine.
It's just
that's
history.
fine.
But Ryan, the main point is that.
Well, hang on, Terry. Why don't you let me ask the
years
question instead of diving in? Because the topic of the panel is supposed to be about the divinity of the Bible. So, are we getting to a point where we're going to be discussing divinity based on all of these things, or am I supposed to be getting something about divinity from what we've covered so far? Because well, you can whine about it. We're supposed to be having an uncomfortable conversation or a conversation where we engage honestly with the substance. And what well, shut the fuck up, dude. What I'm telling you is, what I'm telling you is that I don't feel like I'm learning anything about divinity right now. I'm just communicating that. It's okay if I'm missing stuff, that's fine. I don't have context to make any of this meaningful to me. So if I feel like this fish out of water and I'm not getting much from this, I imagine there's a lot of other people who are in a similar position. Dude, why don't you fucking chill? There's a lot of other people who. So I'm just curious. I'm not trying to fight except for with Teriyaki because he's a bitch. But go ahead.
Everybody quiet. Everybody quiet. My show. I 100% respect what Ryan's saying before you jump in, Teriyaki. And yes, this is getting to the divinity, because when it comes to the Bible being divine, and I'm trying to get as quickly as I can to the second part, which is, does the Bible claim to be divine? We have to understand if the text that we're talking about is the right text that we should be reading, right? If there's other books that were left out and they could disclaim or claim a new divinity, then why should we be talking about the divinity of this testament, right? And I agree, without the subtext of knowing the next step, because I think everything that we're going to talk when it comes to divinity will step back into these particular, the whole creation of this. So I am, like I said, I'm trying to build the rocks, even if the rocks don't make sense to the final question. The question is based on the rocks.
Well, I
could ask you the question without giving you the rocks.
I have questions about the rocks already.
And I'm open to that.
The big question I have is this: since Catholicism didn't come around until later, and the Catholic Church actually got turned into the Roman Catholic Church because of Rome and its influence. My curiosity is, was there a time in history where there were books that should have been included, but Rome decided, no, we don't like those books, so y'all aren't allowed to include them? Because a lot of the history of the Bible happened during the Roman formation, during the Roman Empire.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And by the way, if I were to just scroll ahead here, I actually do have Enoch that was being questioned there, and Roman government influence. And we're almost there. We're so close. Because I've heard this stuff before, and I actually didn't have answers, and I was curious, and I looked into them. And I'm hoping some of the panel also has looked into this and can give some alternate debate. I've been looking at both sides for a long time. So yeah, I had the same question, and it makes a lot more sense understanding this right here, where the next section we're going to. The Christian Old Testament, by the way, the 27 books that are the same 27 books that we look at today were formed in the 2nd century AD, right? The Council of Nicaea, which, by the way, was started by Constantine of the Roman Empire. He actually paid for all the bishops of all the churches, Christian churches. And by the way, Rome still wasn't Christian yet. That's going to come like 300 years later. But he was, and he invited everybody to like finalize the canon. The canon that they finalized was the same canon that they finalized 100 years prior. And the lead bishop, and I actually have that, I think, there's my screen here. What was his name? Somebody might know it on the panel. Hebrew Bible, Christian New Testament, or Old Testament. So yeah, the Christians, by the way, just to put notes before we jump into that, the Christians' Old Testament did adopt the Septuagint, and the New Testament, they actually liked Enoch. They actually included it originally in the Old Testament, but later rejected it, which is kind of interesting. But in the New Testament, yeah, I'm lost here.
When you get into the history of it, it's pretty easy to get lost, because there are times where they removed a book or two and then put them back in. So it can be confusing.
So I mean, to be clear, actually, the Christians did not remove a book from all. So the 27 books were pretty well established, and there were other books that some churches were teaching, but the majority of them were not. So in the 1st century AD, so we're talking 60 years after Christ's death, right? The 27 books were pretty regularly taught, but there were other people that were circulating the Book of Thomas. Enoch had already been around for a long time. The early Christians really did like Enoch in certain sects, but the majority of the Christians were saying, we're kind of feeling like the Jews do. Maybe that shouldn't be in there. But they weren't adding and removing books. When they were establishing these canons, I can't find any evidence in history, even with Constantine, that he actually had an influence, that they already established 27 books. They went into that conference. You know what came out of that conference was they actually documented all the books they didn't include. They didn't hide them. They didn't bury them like the conspiracy theories on YouTube and put them in, like, hide them. They actually documented, these are the books that we didn't include, and this is why we didn't include them. So I don't feel like there's any conspiracy there. I think it's very well documented in history of exactly how this canon came into being. And kind of going to Ryan's originally question, where's the divinity come in? Well, I want to talk about divinity if we can actually establish that there was a pretty good hierarchy here for determining what those canons were. And what I want to open it to before we go into the divinity is, and I'm sure Teriak is going to freaking go crazy on this, because I know you're the conspiracy theorist, right? I put examples of misconceptions here. Why Enoch was excluded from the Bible. Now, this one, I'm going to admit.
Sorry.
That,
something. Go ahead. I'm next.
Go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I missed part of what you were saying real quick there because I had to grab a bottle of water. As far as why some books were not included in the canon, but there was, in fact, I mean, there's several books that we know existed as old as the four Gospels, and in some cases, I mean, it's debatable as to which ones actually came first, that got set aside for, I don't know, not because they were determined to be forgeries necessarily, but more for reasons other than, they don't belong.
Yeah, so I mean, this is really interesting here, and this is kind of a sidestep, but an important sidestep, right? So we have the Gnostics, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Gnostics that were Christians. So they were also Christians, and they believed in Jesus, but they didn't believe that Jesus was, and God was, our salvation. They believed that he was the answer to basically unlocking the mystery, basically being able to fulfill being like God on earth through revealing that mystery, right? And then the other version of Jesus is the one that we have as Christianity today, which is we can't do that. We are incapable of doing that unless we resolve ourselves to Christ. So, and by the way, the Gnostics today is one Gnostic, but back then it was like 6 different Gnostics. Some of them had a lot of remnants of the pagan religions. And when we look at some of the things like the Gospel of Timothy, this tends to go more to the direction of the Gnostic view that Jesus is not part of the Trinity. He was somebody that God sent to help us unlock the mystery in ourselves to become fully divine in our own self. Now, this didn't line up with the other testaments we have. So now we have to look at, like, okay, were there more Gospels like Timothy? And maybe Ryan will appreciate that. Maybe
Thomas?
Thomas, sorry, yeah. Thomas, yeah.
That's not exactly what Thomas says. I mean, Thomas absolutely, as a matter of fact, if anything, the bigger issue with Thomas was that his style of writing portrays Jesus as almost being superhuman. And that was a very big issue. So it's not a matter of, he wasn't God. It's a matter of his style of writing they believed was too fantastical. That was one of the number one arguments against it. And the number 2 argument against it, which Animated Effigy has brought up, and I absolutely agree with them, is it advocates that we should have personal relationships with God and Christ. And that we don't need an intermediary between us and them to talk to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you haven't read it,
And that's
really
I
worth
don't
it.
think I don't think though that trying to understand the stories in the Bible or the passages or whatnot would be trying to differentiate between being able to communicate with God directly, like when you pray or whatnot, or any of that. I think that's just trying to differentiate what the word of man was that we took away from whatever the situation was that was being described, you know. And I think it's fair to try and understand what it is that they were
Safe
saying
topic will be coming
and
up.
try and in
tonight,
even
this
in
year.
some cases there are some things that are so on the fence about what they mean that it could go down a light road or a dark road. So I understand why people kind of pick it apart at times to try and understand and make sure what it is that that passage or that text is saying.
And that makes sense. I mean, and I only read on Timothy. Haven't read that one, but I have actually had the same argument on Revelations. I'm like, Revelations is so out of context with all the New Testament, not written in the same style, uh, completely like metaphorical. And I always struggle with going, how is our end of the story so like metaphysical that I can't even understand it? And like, there's 100 pastors out there that keep on explaining it to me that I still don't get it.
And by the way, I do understand what you're talking about with like the Gnostics, because some of the Gnostic gospels they definitely get a little bit out there, and they
Yeah.
definitely snatched up whatever they could that they thought might help them out in gaining any kind of ground. Um, the uh, I can't find the right word for it. They came under very, very firm attack, let's put it that way, over the years to essentially eradicate a lot of them, especially throughout Europe. Um, and I get it. On the same note, the reason why they were so wildly popular, especially like in the much older times, like medieval times, was because I mean these were the kinds of people who, if they were walking up the road and there were coins laying on the road, they wouldn't pick them up because they didn't belong to them. They took it to an extreme of having no possessions and trusting that they would be provided for. Um, So I mean, there's good and bad, and I do get it though. But they did make it a habit of picking up whatever text they possibly could. So I'm not too quick to pass off all Dead Sea Scrolls over to being Gnostic texts. That's all.
Oh yeah, no, I would agree with that too. And I mean, I'm not 100% sure that everything that got excluded wasn't divine work, but I do going through. I mean, and I'm an idiot. I'm a novice. I am a layman. I'm trying to understand it as a Protestant. Um, like, could have these guys that were well studied had been hanging out with God, praying more than I pray, and I like to think I pray a lot. Um, Mistaken in their saying of this shouldn't have been included. But from when I'm reading the logic, the A/B logic tree, kind of makes sense. Where they're like, hey, we've got a lot of these books out here that were accepted by everybody, and then we've got this book here, and even if 80% of it matches, if 20% of it is going against what everybody else is already circulating, and we have this from the prophecy or the prophets that have already been established from the Torah. Maybe this is a book because it doesn't quite match up, should align. And I've read a bunch of things and saw a bunch of things where there's also these little things that are like stupid nuances where they notice that there's new names in those particular testaments or writings that happen to be specific to that area where it was found, but not specific to Jerusalem and the area of that time. Therefore, they take all these pieces and they add them up, going, okay, 20% of this doesn't add up. The names don't even match that geographical location or that area. Like, they've been pretty scientifical, even back in the days with the bishops looking at it, they're just like, that name didn't exist in this era of this time, only in that region at that time. Therefore, we have to just kind of assume this doesn't fit in the canon.
Now,
But I personally see, and I'd love to hear the argument on this, I personally have not seen from my personal research that there has been any Roman influence on the final canons. I
Yeah, there
do
is.
see the Romans
Yeah,
in there.
They're most okay.
Oh.
Okay.
There was. It was Rome wasn't willing to accept a 12-month calendar, and they were pitching the argument that it was biblically stated that there was a 12-month calendar in some way, and they conceded that and added Janus and Phoebus, which is January and February, to the calendar. So we now have a 12-month calendar. Otherwise, we would have had a 10-month calendar. And if we went off the Book of Enoch, we would have had a 13-month calendar, each month consisting of 28 days.
and even if even if
Which
the
makes a
input-
lot more sense.
Even if the input,
Sorry,
though, in these situations comes from political situations or this group of people editorializing, saying maybe there's some redundancies, we want to make this book legible and readable for people so that they can actually get through it. I could see the editorial process to shrink it down being chalked up to human error and human influence. At the worst case arguments, like you could easily see somebody saying maybe this would piss off this group, so maybe we should just leave this book out because it contains X thing, and you can get all the good values from these other stories. So the politics of dealing with other people is probably more likely the explanation for these discrepancies than anything. So even if Rome did do something, like at the end of the day, if that's what it was needed to get the job done, that's what's fucking needed to get the job done. Oh. Did we lose Vybe?
No, I'm still here. Sorry. Yeah, so first off, to Cleaner's message, I don't think changing the calendar changes the canon. There may have been some concessions there, but I'd like to see some proof on the choice of books, or it doesn't even have to be historical proof, just maybe logical proof that the changing of books benefited the Roman Empire, especially because, once again, the Council of Nicaea, Constantine was kind of a rebel in Christianity, and Rome didn't really accept Christianity for a couple more centuries after that.
Well, true, but I would say, I mean, you can tell for sure that it would have caused some upheavaling if they had included the Book of Enoch and said, okay, we're going to go off a 13-month calendar, whereas the whole of Rome and all of their subcultures and substates that they owned, they were already going off a 10-month calendar at the time, and much later, towards the end of the Roman Empire, we're going off of the 12-month calendar. If you had to change your whole population from a 10-month calendar to a 13, I mean, you're adding 3 months. You've got to get word out to everybody, and you know what I'm saying. So I can understand why they would say, okay, no, we don't want to include that book, because that book is going to just completely change the way that we're understanding our years right now, and that's going to screw with everything.
Yeah, but by this time, the Jews had already rejected it and left it out. The Christians had already left it out. First century, there were, and the only ones, and it's still there today, is the Ethiopian canon that has it there. I just find it a hard fetch to say, oh, we don't want to change 12 or 13 months, so we're going to leave Enoch out. Like, I would feel like
no, I'm saying a correlative reason, not the causative reason, but just that being one of the correlative reasons. Like what you were saying, where it may change their society or something in some way, and I can see that. I can understand why they would say, okay, this may change our society in some way, in X way, and there may be a ton of other reasons that they chose not to include the specific books, but that was just like an example of why they may have chose not to include some of those books on a socioeconomic level, not so much a religious level.
yeah.
If I can make a small request, while we're laying these rocks down, which I think these are really interesting rocks. I'm trying to follow it all. But do you think we could weave in a little bit of the divinity into the topic that we're building up to with the rocks? Like, because I don't see the connective tissue.
Well, what do you call divinity, Ryan? What would you expect?
I mean, it actually is almost, it means kind of nothing to me. Like, I don't even have a concept of divinity, which is kind of the whole premise that I'm coming into. Like, I have no clue what that means.
Fruit.
What?
Fruit.
Boots?
Boots?
Truth.
Truth?
Truth.
Oh,
Yes.
Speak English.
broth. He's saying broth.
Yo,
like for
yeah, it sounded like you were
Yeah.
saying boots.
Oh, Jesus. When Jesus says the way, the truth, the life, like that's basically what like the actual representation of God is. And this is why like the Gnostics point out, is like, why would like God, like especially the Old Testament God, like why would that be a God worthy of worship if he's telling you he does not want you to have knowledge of good and evil? He does not want you to have knowledge of morality. He wants to keep you ignorant. That's why they rebelled when the Book of Enoch like actually lists out. It's like, yeah, it was a whole rebellion
I'm
against,
more
and then
confused now.
these fallen
Vybe,
angels.
can you
taught
help
us
me
all
out
their
here?
knowledge.
I'm more
I don't
confused
think
now.
that was
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's bring Ryan up here, right? So it is about truths, and when we're looking at divinity, and actually Teriak asked this question. He goes, "What do you mean by divinity?"
Mm-hmm.
And I think I put it in the channel. I said the Bible is a group of books. That's Latin. The Holy Bible is basically supernatural group of books. It means there's something bigger behind this collection. The divinity means, do I feel that these books are true? So I can feel that the Chronicle of Narnia, this collection of books, is true. But is there any proof behind that? There's no history behind the characters, the Chronicles of Narnia. If I believe in the Chronicles of Narnia, then I am believing it on no factual basis whatsoever. Now, the Holy Bible, the supernatural truth, when I read that Bible, and this is the next two questions we're about to go into, does the Bible claim to be it without any history? Can I actually treat the Holy Bible like the Book of Narnia? And the second question would be, is the Holy Bible divine, by saying, actually, I can look at some history, and we have history on both sides, secular, non-secular, that Paul existed, that Jesus existed. I think the one context that maybe most people would debate would be whether he rose from the dead. If I could convince you that he rose from the dead, and Paul is correct in his 500 witnesses of him rising from the dead and talking with him for days, hundreds of days after, that potentially that's supernatural. Potentially that could be godlike. Potentially, if he's God and he taught from this canon that we are teaching right now, the stepping stones I'm talking about, the stepping stones that we're saying, what is the final canon? If he was, and when I say final canon for Jesus, the final canon was not the New Testament. The final canon was the Old Testament that he was reading from. Then if God himself was reading from the Old Testament, wouldn't that make the Old Testament true? These are the stepping stones we're going through, and this is where I'm trying to get to from beginning to end here. And I do have problems with it. I definitely see gaps in it. I definitely see holes in it. But these are the stones I'm trying to build to get to your point, Ryan.
Okay.
Well, I think the question.
I'm still a little lost, but I'm trying to follow. Like, just to clarify, I guess. So, if by divine we mean truth, so are we just saying that like there are things in the Bible that did happen, or are we saying like everything that's written in the Bible actually happened? Can we?
I mean, so that's a, and as we were going through the canon last week, we have stories, we have songs, we have poems, and we have history. So the Torah, which is the first 6 books, Genesis through Deuteronomy, are basically history. Now, we can debate about Genesis history in that, is it literal or is it metaphysical? And I can say, I mean, I always came from a science background. My truth is, I believe that the universe started a really, really, really long time ago. Maybe Christians will hate me for that, but that's what I believe. And when I read the King James version, it sounded kind of fantastical. When I read the more word for word version, I actually read it and I'm like, this lines up with physics. I mean, this actually, like the words that I'm reading right now from the most literal translation actually really lines up with physics. This lines up with my idea of the world. Now, the Orthodox probably out there, Eastern Orthodox, are probably going, I hate you. You're an idiot. You don't get to make that interpretation. And this is something that us Christians wrestle with the different faiths. Good news is we all actually are still on the same moral set, which keeps us in line with each other. But I mean, once again, this is why I have these conversations, is especially when you're going to see it later in the episodes. There are things that I can actually say, I don't think the world is 3,000 years old. And I think the Old Testament and Genesis, in my opinion, and there are probably people on this panel that disagree with me on my faith, might disagree with me, but I think Genesis actually describes in physics a very good interpretation of the beginning of the universe.
So a truth claim would be what we're referencing for whether or not the Bible is divine.
Like in totality, or just like that there is truth to it?
I think that's a fair question because, like, I mean, we could see that some of those people existed, just like we could see Mary Shelley existed, but nobody says that Frankenstein's true.
Yeah, for sure. So
Yes, but would you say that there would be metaphorical truths that we could still extract out of that story? Like the dangers of, like, for example,
would,
like the dangers of ethics for science. This is what happens when, like, you know, the science goes mask off. You have for Frankenstein's monster.
To some degree, I would say any work of fiction or any story, any books that you can read, you can extract like quote unquote metaphysical truth. You can extract knowledge from.
They're lies, but they're noble lies.
I don't know that I would use the word lies for that. I understand what you're saying, but I feel like I would use different language. Like, they're stories is what I would say. They're stories.
Yeah, but fiction can still give you truth.
Yeah, but in a very different way than like something. This is the whole like Jordan Peterson thing, right? Everyone like he's like, oh, but like yeah, I mean, if the truth that you're extracting is like lessons you're learning, right? I agree. You can learn lessons that you can apply to your life, but those lessons are going to be different for everyone who interprets the books. So it
yeah,
seems
but like for example, like you could be secular, but the same reason why they worship Jesus would be the same. Like for example, in the Avengers, when Tony Stark sacrificed himself, it's the same concept. Like that belief that is true. That if that time comes, it's like you got to take that bullet.
Well, they do say
that shit is divine.
They do say in Christianity that, from what I've heard, is you can reach the top of that mountain without the guide of the Bible as well. It's just the likelihood of it is significantly lower because the Bible is a step-by-step guide to get to the top of that mountain, whereas if you have to do it on your own, you're kind of just figuring it out, feeling it out as you go, and you can get it wrong. So
no, I mean, it depends on which version of Christianity you're looking at, right? So when it comes to Catholicism and Orthodox, right, they both split from the same basis. And that basis is Jesus taught 12 apostles. And Jesus is the authority, not the Bible, not what we're debating, not what this particular episode is about. Christians and Orthodox do not believe in this particular debate. They'd probably be screaming at me right now because Jesus taught something and he knew exactly what he was saying. Now, people wrote down what Jesus did and what he said. And now here I am on this podcast trying to interpret what he said. And I'm trying to make the relation to the Old Testament. And I'm just personally, the point I was trying to make is that because Jesus taught from the Old Testament, I can scratch that one off as right if I believe in Jesus. I don't even have to debate that. If he is God and I believe he was God, then there's no reason for me to even talk about the canonization of the Old Testament. Because if he didn't think it was right, he would have been like, everything is right in this except for this chapter.
So
ignore that, right?
I got a
But
question.
now what we're talking about is yeah, go ahead.
To that point that you just made, you've said it a few times now. This is my understanding. I could be completely wrong, but there was a point where Jesus was on earth. He was told he was God, but he didn't have a divine entity within him. He didn't have the divine foresight until his moment of death when he joined the Holy Trinity. He was essentially just a human with powers at that point that was
No,
confused
I did not
and
say that
scared.
once.
No, well, like, that's how I've understood the biblical canon, is like he was asking, why do I have to die at one point, and didn't understand the point.
So yeah, that's really interesting. I understand that. So I got that too. I was like, how could God be sitting on the cross going, why am I being forsaken? If you're God. But I mean, as you really start digging in, you realize that, okay, so God is a NPC, or not an NPC. You are a player, and you jump into a video game, and you're shooting everybody up, right? You are that player, and you have every vulnerability. Even if you could have beat his ass in the real world, if the other player in that virtual game can beat your ass, you still deal the punishment. You have every vulnerability, everything that you don't have the capability as the player of doing in the real world. You don't have those. You have the restrictions of that world. So here is God. He takes himself and he puts him into our skin, which has the flaws of lust, addiction, all these things that he doesn't have, and he's put himself in the body that now has that. Him as himself in that body, he still was able to live a perfect life, but he still had the same pain that we do. So even as God as us, which I actually find interesting, and this is one of the questions I had, I was like, wow, maybe God now realizes how hard it is to be a human. Like, he created us like this, and he put himself on the cross, and he's like, but he did repent. I mean, in the end, it was just like he's suffering for everybody.
I'm more
right?
wondering about what, if this cup was taken from, or may this cup be taken from me in the Garden of Gethsemane, in that part where he's having a conversation and wondering, like, can I pass this burden to somebody else? There seems to be a disconnect in understanding. So if there's a disconnect in understanding at that point, could it then be said that just because this particular Old Testament was being used, maybe that was just because that was the religious text at the time and not actual proof of its canonicity, due to the fact that Jesus didn't fully understand and interpret the genius of the plan until a point to where it was almost fulfilled, and he gained that divine enlightenment. He almost had to trust it.
Here's my main thing in terms of the story. Like, what was Jesus was the way, the truth, the life. So when Jesus spoke truth, and this is why I point to the Old Testament God and say, anybody who follows that Old Testament God, look at what they done to Jesus. And when Jesus saying, why have you forsaken me? It's like, why? Like, that's like, oftentimes when people speak truth, like whistleblowers and stuff, their lives are ruined, and they're like, what the fuck, bro? Like I was speaking truth. Like, look at, like, and Ryan's gonna find this pissed off, but like Donald Trump, when he started saying some real shit, he was catching strays, bro. You know what I mean? This is why I'm talking about this whole thing of like the serpent and the thing. It's like they will always demonize the man who speaks truth, or the woman who speaks truth. They will always so it's like you have to be able to prepare to get ready to make that ultimate sacrifice. And this is why I talk about Prometheus being, it's like, this is like a universal concept that's been throughout all these other ancient religions, even going back to Persia and all this kind of shit. You know what I mean? It's this main concept, like Jesus rebelled against the divine order of what was the Jewish law.
Don't people also get like shade and catch strays, as you put it, when they're like lying constantly, as well as whether
Bro, what do I have to fear? If you're going to start talking bollocks about me, I have no issue. It's like, okay, let's bring up the receipts then. You know what I mean? Like, I'll make a full spectacle. I'll go on like an 80-hour like stream, essentially,
I have no idea what
to
that has to do with
expose
the
like how
question
much
at all.
like lies you're talking. Yeah, but what I'm talking about is like truth. That's fundamentally what it comes down to.
Yeah, but
This whole aspect of like Christianity.
Well, okay.
yeah. Okay.
You don't talk about truth, but
The truth
I
shall
the truth.
set ye free.
Yeah, I feel like we're using this word truth in a very weird way in this conversation.
in a very fluid way.
or like a supernatural way.
It's like-
Frankly, it
Would
sounds,
you
it
say
sounds like we're using it.
I'm using? Would you say
Like,
I'm
it's-
using it liberally?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Yeah,
It's
I
rich
would
coming
say-
from the liberal. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, I'm actually left of liberal, but thank you.
I'm the liberal.
Yeah, he's the liberal, if anything.
The liberal. Yeah.
But it sounds like we're describing, we're using it. Really, Teriyaki, can you
Poetic
calm down
license.
for 1 second?
Poetic license. A man uses poetic license, and he's.
That's
Okay,
beautiful.
go ahead.
All right,
Go
Terry,
ahead.
let Ryan go.
Yeah, like it seems like we're using like you mentioned supernatural earlier, and that it feels more like that's what we're describing when we talk about divinity. Like a supernatural truth is what we're referring to, not just truth, but a supernatural one. Am I reading that right?
Well, so you're asking
100%.
Teriyaki, and that he's the wrong guy to answer.
Oh,
that
I was
question.
asking you, Vybe. I'm not asking
Oh,
Teriyaki
okay.
anything. I would prefer not to interact with him as much as possible.
No, but this is the Zeus character that you're pointing towards. This like Sky Daddy kind of concept. This actual divine being that's going to throw down lightning bolts. Correct?
So let's answer this, right? So this was kind of actually the rocks I was trying to lay and let's just jump into the next section, section 2, so we can get to the third one. I think this one's gonna be short, and that is: does the Bible claim to be divine? So we have like 40 different passages of the Bible saying that this is the unchangeable word, even all the way to the last book of the New Testament. So we have to look at the whole Bible as a story, and it's basically the creation of humanity and the salvation of humanity and the savior of humanity. And there are multiple points throughout the book where they cross-reference through time and space, back and forth. So you've got things from the Old Testament. Tyler, are you typing?
Oh, sorry.
I think you have the same keyboard I do. I love the sound, but not when we're talking. Where they cross back and forth. So when we're looking at this stuff, damn, the keys freaking distracted me there.
How I feel when Teriyaki talks.
So ultimately, when we're cross-referencing these passages, they're all cross-referencing, which is just amazing that somebody in the future can talk about a book in the past, and somebody in the past is talking about a book in the future written by different authors, right? This, to me, is a little bit of divinity in that I don't understand how these books can work so well together. But when we look at the books, then if we're talking about how it can be divine without proof or history, just by words, just as Tyler said, if you were to write on a napkin, I wrote on this napkin that I am God, therefore, since it's written on this napkin, I am God. And I don't think that was the exact thing that was written on the napkin, but it's a good example. How can you take divinity out of that? So you can look at a few things. The cross references I was talking about, the human nature within it, the prophecy. We have over 20,000 prophecies in the Bible that all became true. That actually, now if we take the second step, is the Bible divine? We can actually look through history and see that those things came true. And so I'm just going to skip part 2 and just go into, since we're mostly secularists on here, it's just me and Beth, and a little bit of cleaner here on going into history. We can do the steps I talked about before. And I can ask you guys, I mean, you guys have heard of Paul, right? From the Bible? So,
Yeah, but can I just clarify, like when you said like the it's mostly secularists, like I don't believe that Loki actually exists, but like I get behind like people supporting the Avengers.
okay, so
You get what I'm saying?
and I had brought up that point before you brought up Loki, that Narnia is a fictional a story of fictional things that I know about, I might learn from, just like Loki. But there is no historical evidence that any of Narnia ever existed, except for that the author was born.
Well, maybe we can bridge that gap then. I mean, we could just bring up any example of historical fiction and point to that as an example of that kind of it's text that references real characters. Hamilton. Hamilton is a fictional. It's a story. It's a rap musical representing the founding of America. It's a banger, by the way. Highly recommend if anyone hasn't watched or listened to Hamilton, you should. It's really good. But obviously, these are it's referencing real people. These are largely real events, not all of it, but I mean it's represented in a fictional way. So it doesn't speak it to it. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead. I feel like that's a better example because it does refer to real people.
Yeah. So here is a fictional story about real people, but it may be 80% accurate, but 20% fictional, or 50% accurate, 50% fictional. I don't know. Is a great play. However, that was written today, and we have historical documents to actually say what is the discrepancy between the play and actual history. Would you not agree with that?
I agree with that, but then my next challenge would be, what if we just pick? I mean, off the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank, but I know that there are other examples of historical fiction that are old. So, like, what makes this book different than any other book that references a real person and just tells a story?
Yeah, like Islam, for example.
And this is
any other religion, yeah, totally.
This is why I like to step backwards from today, right? Instead of starting at the beginning of time, instead of starting at Genesis, let's talk about what historians, both secular, atheists, and Christians, all believe and have verified, and actually all have said this is correct. So nobody, as far as I know, except probably maybe some fringe people out there, dispute that Paul lived and Paul wrote those letters, and have unauthenticated that Paul wrote those letters. So we can start with Paul. He's very close in history. We have good documentation, even way before Paul, that all so I brought this up once. Socrates never wrote anything. He never wrote a book, never wrote any of his philosophies. Everything was written by his protege.
Plato.
Right? Does that mean that Plato didn't, or did Socrates didn't exist? Yeah, Plato wrote his stuff.
Well, so yeah, we don't know, right? Like we're kind of unsure.
But the Socrates Plato's talking about is not the actual Socrates.
Arguing whether Socrates existed. You guys all just accept he existed, right?
I don't. I think it's up to
No. What I'm trying to say is it does not matter. Like, that question's irrelevant. It's like, what did he talk about? Talk about the ideas. That's my aspect.
Well, actually, this is really relevant, right? Because
but I think I understand that's relevant to what Teriyaki's trying to say, where he's talking about the metaphysical truths. But I feel like the conversation Vybe and I are having right now, it is very relevant about whether or not Socrates actually existed. In the analogy.
Yeah, I know where you're going with it. Like I said, I kind of summed up your thing in terms of, but yeah, sorry, go ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
Well, that's cool. I'm representative of a lot of people who in theory could consume this content, right? So I think it's interesting.
I mean, it's just as unreasonable for you to believe that Socrates actually existed and had these ideas as it is for me to believe that Jesus, and I think we both can concede here. I believe that Socrates existed, and I think you believe that Jesus existed. I think our disconnect would be whether we believe that Jesus was divine or not. You, Teriyak, and you may both agree that, and I think this is Teriak's point, is that actually I think the things he taught were really good. Our only argument is we don't believe that he's divine. And that's really where the question of divinity comes from, right? And I tried to actually point out that before Jesus, the Bible was divine. After Jesus, and because he's so close to our history, and because we can actually trace from Paul and Paul's witnesses, and that he actually was alive during Jesus, even when Paul wrote about the 500 witnesses, all of them were still alive. Like, these were all people, and everybody agrees that his writings are legit. So we don't know if he was lying when he was writing, but we also have multiple testaments outside of that actually say that the things he was writing fall in line. So really the only question for somebody that is secularist disbelieving this is the disconnect on whether Jesus was divine or not. And I think most of the people on this panel will all say he was exceptionally intelligent and ahead of his time. And yes, he did write every psychology manual that's out there today. And he does have a genius for, and maybe you'll go, oh, but we don't like his view on homosexuality. But outside of that, we love Jesus. So our only contentious point here is whether he was actually divine, whether he was from God. My original point in this particular episode was, can we actually say the Bible was divine before Jesus? But I'm also, I feel like it's much easier to say that Jesus is more divine than the Bible, and he validated the Bible by being God. If I believe what I believe, and I'm trying to get you guys to the point where you can see that there's actually history not that long ago that kind of backs that up.
Ryan, or if I may interject.
Yeah, no, please.
My main point is, like, I don't know whether or not Michael Jackson done those things with the alleged thing with the things. You know what I mean? But Thriller's still a banger. You know what I'm saying? I'm just like, let's boogie to the beat, as they say.
But we have. So if all of a sudden we found a bunch of writings about Michael Jackson doing those things, would you believe he did those things?
It does not detract away from the songs, though. That's what I'm saying. The truth in the stories. That's what I'm trying to get to.
I guess the issue that I would come down is like, if there are other ways of constructing moral systems that bring you to similar things that Jesus taught, which I think there are, things that are more like defensible and like grounded in like reality more than just like a book that wrote about these things, like. And like we can have like moral conversations that evolve based on human experience and human interaction stuff and like human relationship. I feel like that's a better way to figure out morality. Even if there are lessons that we can learn from Jesus and apply to those things, like, but I think that yeah, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure the relevance of.
So you can argue back.
No, it is important. What you're saying is important, Ryan, because look at like the amount of people that go Aloha snack bar and then things blow up.
But yeah, I just want to address what Ryan said. He's like, if we could find other ways to convey the message that Jesus said, and you didn't say exactly like this, but you basically conceded that I like what Jesus says, but if there was other ways we could do it without God, that would be a much better way to convey Jesus' message.
Well, a deeper thing that I'm getting at is that I don't see any contradiction in the idea that people at the time that Jesus existed, or like, which I think there's good reason to believe that Jesus did exist, someone named Jesus, or a character that we describe as Jesus. Like, it seems perfectly reasonable to me that somebody in the same, like, having a similar conscious experience that I'm having right now could come to moral conclusions that I find agreeable. And I don't know. I don't see what any sort of divinity has to do with that. It seems like a rational thing that people can come to at any time in space, like based on just existing in the world and like seeing suffering around you and trying to like understand, whether certain suffering is worth engaging in or not worth engaging in based on, whatever values you have, I guess. Like,
so I mean, are you thinking that you're totally in control of the suffering in the world? Like, if you were the dictator of the world, and you're a good dictator,
I would abolish. If I was president, I would abolish the presidency next day.
Okay, so if you abolished it, would that remove all suffering?
Of course not.
Yeah, let's just have pure chaos.
Yeah,
what do you think is going to happen if you get rid of the presidency?
I don't know. I'm not interested.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
You made the claim.
If I was president,
no, I just told you what I would do. I didn't ask you to critique what I would do after I abolished the presidency. I just said it's something I think I would do.
So what is your perfect world?
I don't know that I have such a thing in mind. I'm relevancy, I guess, to the topic. Can you bridge me, like, why my
overruled? Answer the question. I'm the judge.
I don't have a few key points I can lay out to what a perfect world would look like. I don't know.
Yeah, and see, I mean, that's kind of the difference with us Christians. We have a perfect world laid out in front of us. Unfortunately, we're in an imperfect world that doesn't want to like have families and love their neighbors, and it's an imperfect world. We're in a fallen world, and we're trying to deal with that the best we can. Um, God actually agrees with you. If there was a president, he would say, "I'm not going to be president. Like, I'm gone." You're falling really nicely into Christian morals. I think you like what Jesus says, but you just want it not to be Jesus.
No, I don't care if Jesus said it. I think it makes sense that Jesus. Okay, it seems perfectly reasonable to me again that Jesus or anybody throughout history, I think many people throughout history have probably come to similar conclusions about morality that Jesus would have, and that just like just because
No.
those are
I
things
mean,
that are agreeable to me.
Who else in history has been
Everybody.
documented
So I
putting-
okay. At least everybody who has resonated with the writings of Jesus since then. So at least all of those people, probably people before that. You think Jesus was the first one to espouse all these values? Like I don't buy that.
I don't think he's the first one to espouse one of the values or two of the values. I think he is the first one to spout all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I could be convinced of that. Maybe I don't know. That's kind of unfalsifiable because I can't. Well, if I could see even one,
I don't think it's
piece of
necessarily
writing that
unfalsifiable. I
describes.
mean, obviously, maybe somebody before anything was documented did it before him, and therefore we can't go back through history and we can't go back through the logs. We can't go back through the books. But if all the books and writing we have, there is nobody else in history that has been that concise on our actual morality of today.
As far as we know.
As far as we know,
No,
like as I said,
but-
there may be an undocumented person out there that is unprovable, but I don't think it's necessarily an unprovable fallacy. In that there's been a lot of smart people since we've been documenting things, and we haven't found another one. And I mean,
Well, I mean, what happened to people who would have claimed to have some idea of morality outside of Jesus in like a Christian, you know, in a lot of societies that had like, I feel like there were people who would be like kind of taken out of society if they expressed those, that it was like heresy. Like you could say, oh, I believe these things, but I don't get them through Jesus. Then that's blasphemy, right?
I wouldn't necessarily say blasphemy.
Well, you might not, but like I think in a lot of places there would have been. They would have said that about people.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, there are plenty of people that would say I was a blasphemer for the way I was interpreting and saying about Jesus, all this stuff.
Yeah, I know a whole lot of sewing circle Christian ladies that see me smoking a cigarette and say that I can't claim to be Christian. That
Like
doesn't mean-
the issue, Ryan, to cut it down to the brass tacks, the issue that you have is that like what Jesus is saying though is that this morality is eternal and it's unchanging.
Yeah, and
I
I don't
mean,
even
whereas-
that doesn't even like clock to me. Like the idea that morality could be unchanging, it seems contradictory to the nature of morality as I understand it.
Well,
Yeah, but the
morality,
counter argument would be like
what morality is, I believe, would be unchanging. Now, what things are moral would be that would be changing depending on the social construct, the environment you live in, the people you live around.
it's objective, but it's ever changing, in constant flux. This is what Heraclitus was talking about. This is what Nietzsche is talking about, going beyond good and evil. That's the fundamental flaw where you're bringing up the writings and it's like we need to preserve like these actual laws, but you're saying we need to follow these laws. But I'd argue no, these are laws that are not good. I mean,
When you say objective, Teriak, do you mean like it's a factual thing? It's something in reality?
it is true.
Or do you mean
Yeah.
it's something like it is something we're trying to achieve? Like it's unobjective, or
It's like an observable thing. Like do you ever see like that scene in the movies where it's like the leader of the bad guys does something like really immoral or fucked up or like kills his own soldiers and shit like that, and then all of a sudden like the group sees that and obviously the mood shifts and then they're demoralized. You know what I mean? So it's like when we talk about like morality, it's like reason why you ought not to do immoral acts is because it'll literally destroy your own moral or your own soul, as the Christians would talk about. It's like you literally would not want to even live in this reality anymore because you're doing such terrible things. Whereas if you act morally, it's like you wake up out of bed with a big smile on your face. It's like, yeah, let's go. Vybe's doing a podcast. Let's fucking go, boys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, but I felt that way this morning without any of this, like without any of this religious
Yeah.
stuff. Like I felt,
Yeah,
I was like,
that's
oh,
why we
cool, I'm gonna
agree.
do the podcast. Yeah, okay.
That's why we agree. Because the Christians would say, why truth, Ryan? But the counter to that is like, I don't have to explain why truth. Truth simply is. And then because like the Christians say, oh, well, that we don't do that. It's like, yeah, you do. There's no why to God. God just simply is. God is eternal. I do the same thing with truth. Truth is simply eternal. It just simply is. You don't need Christianity, but Christianity, that's why they said Christianity is like Platonism for the masses.
But these things are all based upon the social construct of your society, the group of people you're within.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. As for the whole thing, like for the masses, like I guess this is going to be another area where we obviously differ, Terry. I don't think that like most people are like stupid. Like I don't think the average person is like a moron.
I do.
I think I know you do, but I think most people who believe that are actually like the dumber ones. No offense, but I think the average person is about average intelligence, which is kind of definitionally true because of what averages mean.
Okay, so the average IQ of Somalia is 70. The average IQ of America is 100.
Okay.
So like they have lower IQ on average, and like small changes on the average have massive implications in terms of the extremes.
I mean, I don't know for sure that what you just said is true. I would take that with a grain of salt because of conversations I've had with you in the past. But I think obviously IQ data has a lot of issues at times. I mean, is this modern day like the most recent IQ test that you're referencing? And also, again, what is this relevancy to the broader claim?
Because you're doing the whole like we're all created equal.
I mean,
No, I'm not. Absolutely not. I'm literally not.
Like you. But like you're saying, like this whole claim that like
I'm just saying that like people are not like cavemen like wandering around thumping their heads into each other. I think people have like sentience. Like sometimes, I mean, a lot of these panels, no offense, might sometimes convince us otherwise when we listen to people argue on them. But I think the average person is just like is about as average intelligence as we are. Like they're not. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, just to back you up, Ryan, as well. I believe that IQ tests are internationally scored on the bell curve. So the average guy is 100. However, countries like the United States and first world countries contribute to the majority of that IQ testing bell curve, which means the minority of second and third world countries actually are not contributing to that bell curve, which could slate a second and third world's scores on the overall because they're not scoring as high of a percentage. But I would guess that the majority of the world probably fits in the average.
The reason that I would say that these IQ tests don't really give us a realistic understanding of where people are at is because they're based upon the educational construct. The education system that we live in and that we have available to us will dictate what our IQ test is going to be. Like, for instance, here we understand great concepts in math. However, some tribes in Africa don't do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they may have a lower IQ had they had that education to take knowledge from so that they could take the test. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, and just to further that, I think to further that point home, like I'm looking at obviously there's a lot of different data about this, but there's at least some sources, multiple sources that put the average IQ in Somalia much closer to 80 or like a little bit higher than 80. And they also mention things like civil unrest and limited infrastructure as influences in that number, which makes perfect sense. A lot of poor countries and that are less
but there's still
stable.
Inequality.
Countries that are less stable are certainly going to have less resources that to have like a good environment for you to have a reasonable measurement of something like IQ. But
and I do apologize. I was the first one to step in, but this has nothing to do with God. So because we actually see that people with low intelligence on the IQ scale, so we'll keep it in IQ, are very favorable to God, and we'll see people on the hyper intelligence scale being very unfavorable to God. And we see the majority of people in the middle of intelligence scale being the most wishy-washy, which is, I mean, so if we want to keep it in IQ, the smarter you are, it's not the more you reject God. We have the people on the highest scale going, and sometimes they get a little bit arrogant and they're like, I won't gonna believe in God, but I'm a scientist and I'm a Nobel Prize winner, but I'm just going to call it intelligent design because I'm still not going to take the freaking God card. And I see Tyler like putting his hand up there.
My only point, just real quick to clarify, like where Ryan is.
Tyler, you sound
muted. Let's get Tyler in.
There you go. My bad. I was trying to push us back to topic real quick. I wanted to go down a particular line of questioning that we were trying to getting away from. So when you guys put a bow on the racial IQ conversation, I kind of wanted to go back to where we left off on the notes. I have something I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, like just real quick, like all I'm saying is that like this whole mentality where like Ryan's like the average and all this kind of stuff is like I'm just pointing towards there's vast inequalities, and to ignore that is to ignore truth. That's my main thing.
Yeah, and
It's
so,
uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable truth, but it's
You know
still
what?
truth.
okay,
Based
but
on
nothing
vast
has
inequalities.
contradicted that. So I mean, yeah, like
I agree
Yeah,
with
sorry,
Terry.
Tyler.
I don't think it's
Please
uncomfortable.
bring us.
I
Yeah,
don't think it's that uncomfortable
Tyler,
to.
Tyler,
I agree
please
with
bring us
Terry
back.
out there. We should ignore Ireland and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, just ignore us. We're fucked, boys. We're fucked.
I side with England in the troubles. Anyways.
Of course.
So I was kind of getting to this, and I didn't get to finish the full point. In Jesus' conversation, we lost Vybe. That's who I have the questions for, because he was saying
It's over, Vybe. We've taken over your channel.
Yeah.
This is a coup.
All right,
He'll be
atheist time. Let's get the cocaine out, the hookers.
Not real motherfuckers. Welcome to
Yeah,
hell.
Yeah, let's see them titties.
Plenty of Christians do that as well, bro.
Yeah, but they hide it. We're proud of it.
He's not wrong. He's not
Atheists gone wild.
Yeah, you know.
I think there's, to what Vibe was saying, I think there's actually skewing that isn't that does dispute to some degree the self-reporting on the belief in God. Like, I mean, the understanding that within the science community, a lot of the times, if you admit, "Oh no, I believe in God, and you'll never change my faith," I mean, that you can get looked down on. You might even lose a job. I mean, you may not get a job offer. You may have papers that you don't get published. Within the normal people's sphere of things, like the regular, average, everyday person, right? I mean, if you're in a society, a community that believes and you don't believe, or you say you don't believe, or you have questions, like you get called a heretic, you get called blasphemy, like all these things. So I think there is something to the socioeconomic construction that we have that goes on, and the class structuring construction that we have that goes on within our society, that kind of dictates how we're supposed to behave, so to speak, within our communities. And I think that does weigh in on this percentage that we have of people that are saying like, oh, well, lower IQ people normally are more believers and higher IQ people are less believers. But I don't think that's actually true.
No, again, like I'm not saying anything negative to low IQ. I'm just stating the fact that there are low
Right.
IQ individuals, and that like the vast majority. And this is why America's founding principles, like we need to make sure that the tyranny of the majority. Because remember what happened to Socrates? Socrates started asking some questions, and then all of a sudden he corrupted the minds of the youth. If he existed. But according to Socrates, like that lesson from that story, irregardless of Socrates, even if he existed or not, is still, you start speaking truth to these motherfuckers, and they'll sentence you to death.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things I like about
Which is the
liberal
same
democracy
story as
is-
Jesus.
Well, yeah, I guess one of the things I like about liberal democracy is we have protection. We have like some degree of rights that we don't let be infringed on, but just based on majority rule. Like that's not we don't just rule everything on majority rule. It's reasonably
we used
so.
to.
No, not really.
No, we did. We used to. There were certain rights that we had that weren't infringed upon for a while, and then they got infringed upon.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're saying that we don't have rights anymore, is what you're saying. Okay.
No, that's not what I said. I just said we had certain rights that weren't infringed upon, and then they were.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I might agree with that.
And we have other rights. Well, we have other rights that we've decided are rights now. But that's all based on our society and what we're agreeing we're going to say are right. Welcome back.
Oh, hey.
That's the
It's-
thing about
there he
Streamlabs,
is.
man. If you have any DC, it's like so hard to get back. Where StreamYard, it's a lot easier. Because it has like the X over your connection thing. Yeah, but you're frozen.
Your connection's cutting in and out, Vibe.
Yeah. Okay. Let me turn off the audio. See if that's any better. Can you guys hear me now?
That's better, yeah.
Yeah, sir. They there's fire warnings here. We're having a heat wave, so the power company just turned off all the electricity, and they do that so that the transformers don't cause a fire. So I just kicked on my generators, and I'm going off my Wi-Fi right now on my phone.
I'm sad that Cleaner's no longer T-posing. That was probably the highlight of my night.
I just missed it.
You were T-posing.
I missed the last 5 minutes.
So no, I held off. I waited. We just went to something else. Because my questions were all for you. So.
All right, I think my phone's doing enough bandwidth right now.
Yeah. So my line of interrogation was for you. So in Jesus' conversation in the garden, he has other conversations where he's asking God not to punish people due to their ignorance for crucifying him, or when he asks why God has forsaken him, or he's asking for the punishment of his death essentially to be passed on to somebody else. It does show some sort of human disconnect. It shows some sort of not a lack of trust for the plan, because ultimately that was the path he ends up going down because of his level of trust and faith in the plan, but it does show a level of human disconnect and human emotion there. So that to me shows that like it can't validate your Old Testament theory, because there is that disconnect, there is that lacking in divine knowledge, and it's more of a trust of somebody else's plan until a certain point. But that was kind of what I was pressing you on first, to try to get an answer out of you on for that, but we moved on to something else. My next question is also based on...
let's go one by one so I don't forget them, okay?
Well, it kind of works into the same thing. So these two questions are a tandem then. One, does Jesus's lack of understanding of lack of being a part of that, essentially the creation of the plan, and actually just being the one trusting the plan, not prove to you that they're separate entities with separate consciousness? And the second part of that is, if the New Testament and Jesus' teachings contradicted anything in the Old Testament, which there's a long list of things that they did, doesn't that invalidate the Old Testament as well?
So I don't think it invalidates the Old Testament. However, I'm not God, so I can't give you the answer. I can give you a how I reconcile that in my own head.
Oh, he cut out. That means
You're breaking up.
He's dodging. He's dodging.
Yeah, rage quit. Clear your rage quit.
The robot wins. That's it. The robot wins.
Maybe God didn't like what you said, Vybe.
Well, I don't know what Vybe's answer is going to be, Tyler, but I mean, I would say from my understanding of how most of the religions believe that are Christian, it would be that Jesus was.
Oh, it's hilarious. Cut off right when they're about to give me an answer.
Do you guys really go off stream every time I disconnect?
And Cleaner was you were about to give an answer, and then you froze and disconnected.
Yeah.
And then Cleaner jumped
Like, I genuinely think if this actually is a troll, like you're trolling Taylor, this is like the perfect troll I've ever seen in my entire life.
It's so good.
This is the most annoying thing ever. Okay, so I've never done this before. Cleaner, I'm gonna see if I can make you and Beth co-admins. So if I go offline, everybody else doesn't. Because I didn't realize. I figured when I went offline, all you guys were still online. I didn't realize I have to add you all. So sorry for my inexperience, guys. Here, let me just make sure if I drop off again here, like I said, my power's off. I'm running on auxiliary right now, not trying to evade questions and don't want to evade them.
He's running,
Or-
boys. He's running.
Yep.
When have you ever seen me run?
Got you there.
Never seen
Ryan.
you walk either.
True. I can get up on screen and show you my walk. Oh my God. Okay. You know, I can't see it, but you guys seem to be hearing me right now. So, all right. Through all the power issues right now, and the kids screaming in the background, going back onto the original conversation. Once again, I said, I cannot know God's intentions and how God works. So I am not actually giving an honest answer here. I'm giving an answer of how I try to interpret it, because I actually ask these same questions, right? So I was making the reference to a video game. If by some way, if you have the ability to make an if and, let's go secular. If you can make an if and decision, you're making a decision. Who's to say that the artificial intelligence, and I don't think artificial intelligence is conscious, but who's to say that if you can't make an if then or a random decision, that you're not some sort of intelligence? How do we, as with no God, have the ability to do anything other than what's prescribed on an if and answer in front of us, right? We're pretty much meaningless there. My prescription to that is, if I was God and I don't understand what God is, and I have no understanding what it is to be able to see the beginning, the end, be timeless, to be infinite, to be omnipotent, I can never understand that dimension. But if I were to take that dimension and I were to throw myself into something I created, a program I created, a program that is lesser than me, even though I tried to make it like me, my program is still not going to be able to understand me in my full essence, especially if that program is restricted or has the inputs of what I don't in my world. So I would see Jesus as that piece on earth in a new identity. And God is not omnipotent in Jesus. He's only in himself. He's the avatar on this planet that he created. He has to suffer through what we have to suffer. He still did a perfect job at doing it, even though he questioned it, because God never understood the own restraints he put on us.
I understand that, but if like that's the case, and this is just God in a human body, kind of learning, playing human, then why did the devil think he had a chance to corrupt this entity under God's?
So
yeah, like,
I mean, that now we're going back to like Job, right? Like God and Job have a bet, and I question Job all the time. I don't think Job is part of history of the Bible. I think Job is a story of the Bible. For what you guys were referencing is, hey, there's some stories in there that are good references for humanity. Because if God is God, God doesn't have to prove himself to the devil ever.
Job
right?
is the bet, but no, I'm talking more about when the devil went specifically to Jesus in several instances and tried to corrupt him and tried to like take him off the path of God, meaning that there was a choice given to Jesus that the devil was trying
so
to
we know
work
we
toward.
know that Jesus was full of parables, and the stories that he told to his apostles often were told in parables. Jesus is and somebody corrected me last time. I think I said obstructor. I think the oppressor. The literal translation of the devil in the New Testament is the oppressor. The oppressor, when in that time, in that translation, are all those that go against that person. So in the sense that if we're looking at the oppressor, and I actually want to address this, the devil episode, but I don't mind addressing it here. And once again, this is probably going to make me a really hated Christian. I kind of still doubt the existence of an actual devil living in a place that is trying to tempt us. I believe from the literal translations of the scripture that the oppressor is actually everybody that is living in the dark, not living in the light. Those that do not believe in doing good for their neighbor, those that don't, those that the Kardashians that are telling you that it's better to show your butt on TV than and make money than it is to be good to your fellow neighbor. I believe that that's the actual definition of Satan in the Bible. Now, I this is my interpretations, and I'm a Protestant and I'm an idiot, so I know a lot of people are going to hate me for that. But I really dug in to that, the term of that. So I believe because Jesus spoke in parables, that he was saying he was tempted by everybody in his day's society, that he's supposed to go another way, but he didn't.
Have you ever heard the saying? And I don't know how true this is, but there's a saying that Satan once said, "My greatest achievement would be to convince mankind I don't exist."
Well, he definitely exists, but yes, I have heard that.
I don't know, but to that degree, like, just reading the text is how it's put down. There's this idea that Jesus has this choice to stray away from God's plan, and it's his trust and devotion and faith that keeps him on track. Just like the story of Job, it's his level of faith that is being determined there to show people, hey, like, if you stick with this, even in the bad, good will come to you. But the fact that the devil in the Bible thinks that he has a chance to corrupt God shows me that this isn't just God's will embodied in human form. This is a different entity with choice. And
I think the entity is humanity that is not in Christ, and that entity is your boss when he says, "Hey, I'm trying to make profit for the stockholders. I know that we made this mistake here, but can you trust me that if you don't say anything, I'll give you a raise and our stock will our stock will go up." And therefore, he is actually emulating the nature of Satan, and Satan is that of society that does not believe in the higher morals.
My other question is, like, to the conversations between Satan and Jesus, the conversation between Jesus and God in the garden, and all these other things. How do we have documentation of these private conversations that went on between these two entities or between one person in their head through prayer?
All right, so you're talking about Genesis?
I'm talking when Jesus takes the apostles to the Garden of Gethsemane with his apostles there, and Paul's two sons, and he keeps going back to them. He goes to pray 3 times, and each time he comes back and all of his apostles are asleep. And so there was nobody there to document what he's saying, yet it's documented in the Bible what he was talking about.
Yeah, so I mean, in that particular circumstance, I mean, this is the only thing I can confess that I know, is that this was not that long ago. It's very close in our history. And this was my original assessment. We kind of went back through history. We know that Paul wrote these letters. We know that Jesus existed. We know that the people that wrote the letters about these things happening, when Jesus woke up, he tells his apostles. The apostles wrote it down 20 years to 50 years after he died. That is the evidence that we have. And we don't have any more evidence than that. Like, there was nobody streaming it to YouTube. So just like Socrates, right? We don't have any evidence that what he said is maybe Socrates never existed. Maybe Plato just created him because he didn't want the glory, or he wanted to attribute it somewhere else. I don't know.
Or he was just telling stories, right?
Just telling stories. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, right? When it comes down, I mean, I'll be the first one to admit, if we're really going to look at it on a historical base, and this is why I started this whole thing off with, my faith is unshakable, because what I have been through and what I have seen since my family's devotion, my devotion, years of this, it's unquestionable, but it is only a feeling that I can tell you guys about, not something I can put on paper and prove to you. However, I do like to look at history, and I do like to look at how many coincidences there are, and how that we actually do have lineage to the history that may make you go, when we get to the end of the series and we read through all these things, going, actually, I never knew that's what they were actually saying. I thought they were for slavery. I thought they wanted to enslave everybody. I thought they hated women. Like these things that prohibit the entrance to seeing these things is very hard for somebody that is already in there. And for us, I can easily say to any of my brothers, we all know, like, when you're there, you're there. But at the same time, I love having this conversation to like try to break it down, to bring you into, okay, so we're going through the canon, we're going through how I definitely can say with 80% confidence that the Roman Church, not the Roman Church, the Romans had nothing to do with the canonization of Christianity. The Christianities did. Now, we can have some debates on whether there were some political fights within Christianity on that. But history shows that all those conspiracy theories out there about Christianity and Rome making the Bible, I think that is pretty, for any secularist, any historian, pretty provable as not being the fact, right? And then it really comes down to the divinity. And this is the conversation that we're having right now, the divinity. I have a divinity which I cannot prove, but I am trying to show through history and through the witnesses of the uprising that maybe this is a possibility.
Yeah.
If
Go
I
ahead,
just
Joe.
may, just like real quick on the Book of Job. The quote, real quick, if I could, just Book of Job, chapter 2, verse 3. The Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? For there is none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil. And he still holds firm to his integrity, although you incited me against him to ruin him without cause. So right here, God is admitting to Satan that Satan made him almost destroy Job without a cause. So this is like clearly an unrighteous act, correct? Done by God.
Here's one of my biggest problems with Job is I love this story. I think it's a great story.
It's one of the best.
I think it has great morals. However, I have a hard time understanding that, in my mind, the story of Job is God trying to prove to the devil that he's better. And the God that I know of the Bible would never go to the devil and go and make a bet, like, hey, corrupt him as much as you want. I'm going to prove to you. Like, God doesn't have to prove to the devil. And once again, I have my own interpretation of the devil. So to me, that is one of the stories, not the history of the Bible, of obedience and being good and the rewards of God. It's not, to me, that can't be an actual story, because God would never, it's literally like,
exactly,
the devil and the violin, like, I'm going to,
real quick, and I'll shut up for the next 20 minutes, I swear.
For his nature.
I'll shut up for the next 20 minutes, I swear, because remember at the start of the story in Genesis, again, it's another story where your senses are kind of like, this doesn't seem like it's actually the same, where it's like recording history. This is kind of more so metaphorical. Remember where the serpent, Satan, convinced you to bite the knowledge of good and evil, morality, and now you have Book of Job, and Satan comes in and says he tests God, or what you would perceive to be God, in this story, and say, let's test these morals. Look what he done to Job, and now he's saying Satan made me do it. God's supposed to be all powerful, so Satan's not supposed to be able to control God or make God do anything. You know what I mean? So like that's why, like I said, the Book of Job is a beautiful story, because you have that right in the middle of the Torah.
It's a beautiful story, but it's not the true nature.
Well,
but exactly,
okay,
it's literally a story. It's literally a story to test your morality.
I have a question on the nature, though. The nature that you have of God, right, and the understanding that you have, versus the story. Now, the story itself, and I guess my question really would be like this: if God gives us a story and He makes Himself the main character in the story talking to another main character, much like him and Satan having the conversation of, oh, well, go ahead, I'll prove you wrong. would he not in some way maybe just be trying to show us a representation of how we should be towards evil, and not necessarily him saying this is exactly what happened, but just giving us a representation, understanding that when evil comes to us, we should be like, fuck you, I'll prove you wrong. Would that not fall in line with the nature of God to try and teach us that lesson?
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I
And so this
I
is
get
why
that.
this
I
is
get
why
I get
whenever
that.
people go like, well, is this actually true or not? I always go like this. Who gives a shit? It always comes down to, does it teach you something good for how you should live your life?
Yes. Well, okay. So I'll concede to. I do think it teaches you something good. I even think Teriak said it teaches something good.
Because,
so
for example, because all the secularists or atheists like Ryan, all that kind of shit would be like cheering this on, to all this kind of shit. But you do not put a story like that, even if this is a noble lie, like we're saying, like, and it's all like man written, all it's man made. You do not put a story like this in the middle of like your quote unquote cult. You want to have like that cult mentality where people just obey blindly. It's that spark. It's that like that like the injections essentially, like the V's essentially. It's like a small it's a small poison that's designed to actually make you more immune to the disease. And it's the same thing in Christianity. It's portraying
I really
or
do like
Judaism as well.
I
It's
just have
portraying
to
that aspect. But I'm just saying it's portraying that aspect where it's like you have to even be able to question when people say God, like you have to question what they mean by God. When they're talking about truth and honesty and like the divine, I would say the pious, the good, that's okay. But when they're talking about like this kind of character that would literally just to win a bet with Satan would completely ruin Job without cause. In his own words, he's saying, God is saying ruin Job without cause. You know what I mean? This is where it's like like you don't put that in a cult. You put that in a society that you want to pioneer, that would eventually lead to and what we now call science and technology and innovation.
I like that, and I mean I like and cleaner. I'll concede to that too, right? Like I admitted when I even brought it up, like I can't understand the nature of God. I don't know why he does what he does. I can't claim. I can make an assumption. When you guys ask me a question, why did God do this? I can say I assumed he did this, but given the nature of what we think he is, I can never know what he's doing. If I tell you he did it because of this, then I am claiming to be a false prophet, right? And
Yeah.
Cleaner's explanation was actually pretty good in the sense that maybe God would challenge Satan. He already knew what the outcome was. It wasn't that he was trying to prove himself to Satan. He was trying to write the story for us. And I don't know. I don't know, right?
And see, that's the thing is, like, whenever you approach these things, looking at it from the actual nature of God, the true nature of God, you'll have a tendency to take away, okay, so he did this thing to teach us this. It's not it says he did this thing, did he actually do it or not? When you're looking at it, understanding the nature of God, and you relay that as an objective fact and an objective truth within your life and how you're going to do things, then you approach it differently from someone who is saying, okay, well, I want to prove whether or not this story is true and whether or not the Bible is true and whether or not, you see what I'm saying? There's a different perception.
I'm still very. I'm still very, very confused, to be completely honest.
The idea that
So I have a question for you, Ryan.
Yeah, because I know this. Like, I think there's a lot of like probably religious people watching who like are gonna be annoyed by what I'm expressing right now. But it's I hope that Vybe and like I hope you guys like recognize that I am trying to come out this like in very good faith. Like I'm really
you're good.
Yeah,
You're good,
like,
man.
I find a lot of this like almost impossible to map on to my understanding of reality.
I get that.
Yeah, and that's why we want you here, right? Like you said, to the audience, right? There's people out there like you. So I need you to speak up and interrupt and ask those questions. I need Tyler to speak up. We don't have to ask Teriak to speak up. He will. Love you.
No doubt.
And this is a journey for me too, right? I mean, Cleaner just gave me a new view of job that I had never. I am not coming into this conversation as the expert. I am coming in, gathering as much knowledge as I have, and asking the questions. And like I said, from Tyler and Ryan's and Teriak's questions, I sometimes have the same questions, but I have the faith. But I still want to explore these things. So I think it's important. I think it's an important discussion to have outside of just a biblical group of people. And, and by the way, go ahead, Taylor.
Oh, I was just gonna say I've had a couple decent, put together a couple decent lines of questioning for you, but I've put some in here for having a head injury.
All right. Well, you gotta put them in. So when I lay out the next one, make sure you lay them out too, so I can give you your time and for everybody here, right? Because I want to make sure everybody gets their time, and it's just not like random conversation. And going back to Jesus and Jesus being God, I'm really bad at. You guys know I'm new on YouTube here. I'm really bad at like having a conversation and reading chats, but I did catch one chat from James, and not James from the Bible, but maybe he was named from James from the Bible. I don't know. He said hit them when we were talking about Jesus and being God with James 2:7, and I liked it, so I just wanted to read it out loud. So James 2:7 says about Jesus, but emptied himself by taking the form of a slave, by looking like other men, and by sharing in human nature. And this is, I think, kind of what I was getting to, and I think it's great. I try to memorize scripture, and it's great when guys like James like pop up and say, just hit him with this, because that's what I was trying to say. I just couldn't remember that verse or know where it was in the Bible. Jesus was man. He had all the same temptations, all the same fallibility, but he did succeed in the end by not succumbing to all of them. However, he had his weaknesses, and I mean that would be another question I would have too. Like, couldn't have God just made himself? Like, why did he make us so fallible in the first place in his image? He's like, I'm going to make him just in my image, but I'm also going to add like 5 things that makes it really hard for them to be just like me. Like, that's a weird thing. And of course, here I am now on a panel with all the non-believers, so I don't have my believers to back me up on going, well, Jason, you're wrong here. But yeah, I mean, it is a question I have. I have the same questions.
But that comes back to like people trying to put themselves in the position of understanding God. Because if you're trying to understand why God did something, I mean, it can get into the weeds as far as you're literally trying to understand God himself then. And that, I think, is where a lot of the times when we're reading the Bible and we're trying to understand the stories or the things that God or one of the prophets has espoused to us to be a good prescription, we sometimes kind of like stray off to the side in our interpretations and our understandings, because we'll try to understand the nature of God himself or why God did something. Whereas it's not always necessary to do that whenever you're just trying to understand the good moral of a story.
How dare you question me? I'm made in God's image.
But can I just point out, like, even for like Ryan, right? Revelation 22:13. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. I mean, like when we talk about like writing, even just from like a secular kind of like independent writing, that's great script writing.
Sorry, I'm back.
So I'll say it again. Revelation 22:13. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Is that not like one of the best catchphrases you've ever like? Let's say like the hero shows up, Tony Stark shows up, he says, he drops that line. Are you not like, bro?
I preferred I am Iron Man. I don't know.
Yeah, I actually
that
responded.
sounds like something more than Thanos would say. That sounds more like I am.
What
Inevitable.
about
Yeah.
before Abraham? I am.
I guess.
I mean, these are
Fuck the Iron Man. I
This is
am.
great. The alpha, the omega, right? I sometimes feel like even when like I'm big into physics and metaphysics, and like the whole world of I I get into all these things, and I just see some similarities between that, right? If you're looking at other dimensions and time as a dimension and something being outside of time, and the understanding of those things, it always, to me, in the end, kind of ties in with the faith. And I know most people, like scientists, or like, well, not actually scientists, uh, people in the educational community. And I grew up with two parents that were professors at the university. I grew up in university towns with a lot of religious and extremely non-religious thinking minds. And when I really dove 100% into this faith, I just started seeing crossovers left and right. And when you say Omega, it just, once again, it just seems to cross over so much. It's just that we don't understand God. And I personally think every time we make a new discovery, God smiles. Like he's like, they're getting, like, he made us in his image. And every time we get a little bit closer, understanding how we were made, he's like, oh, they're getting closer to me. They're getting closer to me. They're almost figuring it out, but they're still 10 centuries away. I think he really loves it. I don't think he's against science. I think he loves it when we're understanding his nature. I think he's loves it when we understand how the atom works, how we get down to the quark, how we get down to the metaphysics of things. I mean, that's just my opinion. I feel like they almost marry in nature when you really dig in, like we're trying to dig in here.
I mean, I guess like I can imagine that there are like kind of poetic congruencies that you can find, but I'm not sure that speaks to divinity. I mean, it might be cool to like build these connections in like a fun exercise. And I don't mean to downplay it, but it seems like something that you could perfectly do without any sort of divinity.
Okay.
Right?
Let me hit you with this. What does the word "is" mean?
Well, it depends on what is.
That's why when they say God is I am,
Yeah.
even to have that concept, you need to have some sort of abstract concept of like the metaphysical and
Is a
cetera.
shorthand. It's kind of an equality symbol.
truth. What is, and then what's a lie is what is not.
I feel like for is, like A is B, we have to have some A and some B.
A equals B is the same thing. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, it's a statement about A and B
He's
and
a
their
coder, so
relationship.
it's actually A equals B, unless he's JavaScript.
Well, actually, to be clear,
Is he a C boy?
just hang on. Let me respond to that, because that's actually one of my favorite things about coding as a coding educator. I don't read the assignment operator as an equal sign. Vybe might do this, but when I type variables, I say, like in JavaScript, I would write let A get and then the value. I actually say gets, like the variable gets a value, and that way I don't have to run into this issue where I say like double equals. I highly recommend, if anyone's looking at code, to do what I just told you. It makes code so much easier to read. I learned it from my programming professor, Colin Archibald, rest in peace. My first programming teacher taught me that day one, and I feel like I've always had a leg up on other people learning code because of that trick. So just a fun thing. But.
Yeah, but I can convince you of the God concept, right? So, for example, right, is change universal?
I think so.
Yeah, so change is universal. So, something is either governing like that through like a law or some sort of force is enacting that change, and that is like there's time.
I don't know if that's
measure.
true. Like those like time, space, etc. might be just descriptors of a changing reality.
Okay, what's causing the change?
I don't know. I don't know if there has to be a causal factor there. I don't know what it means for there to like necessarily to be one. I don't know if there has to be. It could just be like, is that what you're saying? Is that what you're getting at? Like it just is.
It simply is.
Possible.
Change
Guess so.
simply is. Change is constant.
Yeah.
We die, we grow old, etc., etc.
Do you
know what I mean?
Do you use that?
But whatever causes that is what like Heraclitus was pointing towards with the logos, and in John, in the beginning was the logos.
Do you use that get function for just instantiation, or do you use it for like an if statement as well?
I mean, like instantiation or any updating variable value. Like if you're changing the value of a variable, I say gets. Like the variable gets, because variables are kind of like a box that contains a value, right? In a sense, like a box with a label on it that's the name of the variable.
Yeah, I program for a living, so
yeah. Okay, cool. So you know exactly, everything. Yeah. But then you know exactly why this is a useful syntax or mental syntax.
I'm just curious how you use it. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. Just anytime I'm writing like variable gets value. That's just how my mind reads. That's for 13, 14 years since I started learning how to code. That's how I've done it because of my first professor. Super useful thing. I always teach that to, because I did coding teaching for a long time as well. I always teach my students that. Super useful.
Yeah, you know what's funny is I really originally thought when I got into this universe that all my streams were going to be programming streams, and I was going to teach you how to program, Ryan, because I can see how you've got so much to learn. I don't know why I decided to freaking start my streaming universe in the Bible, which I have so many questions about and am so uncertain about, even though I'm 100% certain in my faith. But somehow, instead of programming classes, I decided to go this direction. And given that and my programming knowledge, I brought this screenshot up just to bring it back from programming over to and Ryan, we'll go off stream and I'll teach you how to program. This is a diagram of the 40 books from the beginning to the end and the different verses, and both forward and backwards. And this is to go back into the metaphysics of like multi-dimension and time, how many times it references itself through 40 authors. I don't remember how many locations. I think it's like 20 different locations over 1,400 years, where all these people are writing books about things they don't know necessarily about the other books, or like the person up in the top. You can't see my cursor, can you? The person on the left didn't know about the thing that the person was writing on the right, but they wrote about what the person was writing on the right. This is going through, like, if God is timeless, the only way this communication could actually happen, and the only way you could put all these books together, is through some type of divine intervention. I mean, it can't. I could see how you could say, well, the person on the right side, which is later in time, read about the thing on the left side, therefore they wrote about the thing on the left side. But we have so many occurrences on the left side, pre the person on the right side writing, that they wrote about what's going to be written on the right side.
Do you have
we have like 20, or actually I think it's over 20,000 references. I asked ChatGPT to break down the biggest ones. There was so many it couldn't do it. Like the cross references between time and periods and locations. It failed every time, because I knew about this, and I had seen these graphs before, and some people have done it, and I tried to get a summary, but ChatGPT couldn't give me a summary because it was just too big. It was just too big.
Or do you have any source that kind of breaks down the data that produced this chart, like and because I'd be interested to actually look at that specifically.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. This is one of the things that just like blew my mind when I was doing the research, because I had my uncertainties as well. I mean, so I started this Bible study because I had uncertainties, not of my faith, but there's many things that I question in the Bible. I'm admitting this today, and I've said this one, I think, on every episode. I read Numbers, the book of Numbers, and as I was reading it, I was actually adding the numbers up in my head, and they didn't add up. And so then I typed into Google, not ChatGPT. I was like, am I the only one who thinks numbers doesn't add up? And I found like 1 billion documents on how many people had said, yeah, numbers do not add up. The book of Numbers the numbers in Numbers do not add up. I'm like, how ironic is that? Now that doesn't mean that I don't believe. It just means I'm curious, right? And there are explanations, and there's like 15 different explanations. So now I'm looking at this, and I'm like, okay, which of these 15 explanations do I trust? So I do understand when you're scholastically looking at the Bible, where some untrust could come from something as simple as that. When you're academically looking at it, my heart doesn't look at academically. My heart is 100% in and trying to understand everything, but my mind does ask questions, if that makes sense. And I will send you this graph was where did I get this one from? Was it the
Chris Harrison net?
Yeah,
But
Chris
it's okay. I'm
Harrison.
reminding you. I'm giving you an
Yeah, I'm just
And-
curious. Like, what does it mean for it to exactly for it to reference something like, and how like what's the evidence that these are things that are referenced without like knowledge of each other, like that
It would
sounds
be
a
like
lot of kind of built
it's
on
both
assumption.
forward and past knowledge of authors that in multiple locations. And like I said, it's over 20,000 references between all the books that actually cross-reference each other both forward and backwards in time. That is pretty much impossible.
When we say cross-referencing forward and backwards, and you seem to, there was a point where you kind of asserted that like the people forwards in time, they didn't have knowledge of specific things, but why are we?
So
saying
somebody
that?
in past of time is talking about something in forward in time. Now I could see how you could say,
Damn it.
well, the person
Chris, you
forward
are
in time
first.
is going to go, oh, they wrote about me. I'm going to write back about that was me that they wrote about, right? But then we also have all these other criteria that actually make it authentic, which I was trying to go through in my stepping stones earlier, that all those were already eliminated. So of the things that, and this was only based on people that witnessed, like when we look at the New Testament, they had to be directly apostles of Jesus. Like there's so many criteria that would eliminate any outliers, and that's why books like Thomas, or the Book of Thomas and Joseph 3, and all these other books that are documented as being removed from the Bible because they didn't fit in. If they were programmers, Ryan, they were programmers. They were like, this doesn't logically make sense. The names in this book are only the names that they use in that town, and the names of all the Bible are from the original towns, and those names don't line up with the names in this town. And not just one thing. They didn't say one thing. They said this didn't fit, this didn't fit, this didn't fit. So all these books got removed. So people that were like trying to like add books or add prophecy on their own volition got removed based on things that didn't logically fit the criteria, and didn't have an original witness, didn't actually have some association with Jesus. Prior to that, why I was trying to exclude the Old Testament, if we can actually conclude that Jesus was the founder of Christianity, if he acknowledges those books, we don't have to worry about that original canon. So then we end up with this at the end of the books that were chosen over. I mean, and we know back then they didn't have telephone, they didn't have internet. Like the ability for somebody to know about this and that and have those cross reference, that meant, like, if it was 10, I'd say, yeah, maybe you're right. 20,000?
it's word concept. It's a word concept cross reference, Ryan. So like, if one of the books later on that was written referenced a book from before, that would be a word reference or a word concept cross reference. But also, if both of them are talking about like you shouldn't kill, right? Then that would also be a word concept cross reference that it would be showing in the arc. It's just showing all of the similarities over time between the word concept cross references, which is, I mean, it is kind of interesting, but I think even at that, a secularist could quite easily come up with a completely destructive argument that, yeah, okay, we see that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was through some kind of divine intervention or anything like that. It could just be that a couple of Machiavellian priests that were transcribing the Bibles chose to change some words and make it so that they all look like that. You know what I mean? Like there's always an argument a secularist can have for something like this that'll be destructive because you can't really refute it.
Yeah, I'm not really interested in refuting. I think what I'm struggling to, it's hard for me to grasp like what this fully means in practice. Like if I looked at a bunch of specific examples of what these cross references are and heard the explanations, then I would get a better idea of like what the mapping is that's going on here. But I think that's my issue. Is I feel like that mapping, there's probably a lot of generosity. They're probably being very liberal, as it might be the word, as Teriyaki put it earlier.
Yep.
Like when they're deciding what counts in this, I would suspect. But again, that's my intuition. But I could be wrong, and it would be fascinating to see. Like,
no, I mean, it's a good intuition, right?
Is.
It's a good intuition, but let's imagine that all of us online right now decide that we're going to try to start this. Can we write something so prolific with cross accounts? We all write our own books. We all communicate to each other. We have the internet, by the way, to do that. And let's just say we all live for another 100 years. Can we write 10 books that can have like in the 10th of this time period with the same amount of cross references? And you know what? Using computer technology, and you and I, Ryan, we probably could pull it off with a couple of us. I don't know what everybody else's programming skills are. But it'd be hard. It'd be hard. And now we're talking about pre-computer time.
Well, again, I think, I guess, again, if it comes down to like what these mappings actually look like in theory, I feel like I could construct a graph like this based on like a handful, like all the Harry Potter books and all the Star Wars movies, or something like I feel like in theory there are ways to construct stuff like this, but that could just be my ignorance about how.
No, that was actually exactly my point, right? So, 66 books over 1,000 years. I guess you could take history books, and you could probably pull this off. And in a sense, we do have history there. But we also something that Cleaner missed on here, and this is the color of the lines, is there's prophecies in there as well that actually came true throughout that, and that is part of the legitimacy of the Bible. So when they say God spoke it, the person that said that God spoke it, they didn't actually trust his word unless his word became true. And then we have accounts through history where that word became true, which means that, like, I couldn't just say, I could have been in history 3,000 years ago and gone, oh, I saw a burning bush too. And I got another tablet, and my tablet says this, and here's the prophecies of this. And if those prophecies did not actually become true, then I was removed from the canon.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, there was a lot of scrutiny put into this. I mean, they just like we are online right now, scrutinizing everything between all of us. The same scrutiny was happening throughout this process. And when people bitch about like a book being left out, I can say I'm not sure if all the books that got left out should have been left out or not. I actually don't have a favorite that should be put back in, but I think that what they tried to do was say, okay, we've got a lot of books, and we had a lot of people adding into Scripture what they think. We have a lot of things that they think is right, and like you have this one sect, they're following the same Christianity everybody else is, but they feel like it's a little bit different, and they added their own book. They removed that book because it was only in that society, it only came from there, and only had names from people in that era. They had a lot of criteria when they put the canon together. But I'm not saying the canon is perfect. I don't know. Only God knows. But I think they actually, and I really searched hard for proof in history of the Romans making the books to dictate their people, and I couldn't find any. I found tons of conspiracy theories, but I found tons of actual historical proof, secular historical proof that shows that yes, Constantine did actually pay to bring everybody together. He was a rebel in the Roman times. Romans did not accept Christianity at the time. He did. He was Christian. He brought all the bishops together. The canonization was already done, and after that meeting, the canonization was still the same. However, he did, by doing that, he did make it he stamped it, right, that this is happening. And what he did is, like, he ordered 300 books to pass out based on that. But it was the lead bishop that actually, and part of the origin of Orthodox, that led this whole thing and led that whole meeting. And Constantine did not come in there, as far as I can find. But I know that, I think it was Cleaner that said, I think he's gone, did say that there was month changes for convenience. But I don't see that as a control for people.
Yeah, I'm about to hit my dinner limit as well. 10 o'clock is when I have to go eat.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I hope we're about to approach closing statements. I'm starting to get a little antsy.
Yeah, sorry.
This has been interesting.
My wife's out of town, so I let it go long. But no, this is awesome. It's really fun to think about. Like I said, my you guys aren't going to change my mind, but the fun thing is, Ryan, I have the same questions you do. Like, I look at some of these things. I think I have less questions than you do, because I've actually looked into a lot more. I think there's always going to be questions, and we always want to be sane about our decisions. It's a tough topic. It's always a tough topic. I'm really excited to get into the singular topics when we start going into, like,
wow, you can't keep my name out of your mouth.
The flood, Noah, homosexuality, slavery, women, those things. I think we can be a lot more direct when we get into those conversations.
Slavery, women.
Yes, but it's not just they still could have said no.
But I mean, once again, I mean, I'm here to actually open the secularist view that when we are on that side, the things I hear in debates against us are almost always wrong. It's somebody that's read 2 or 3 lines and haven't read the whole Bible, and they have a completely incorrect comprehension of where we're coming from. But they use that 1 or 2 lines against us, just like, once again, I said at the beginning of the podcast here, is that it's like the press. You give a 30-minute interview and somebody does a 30-second line without the whole context. So it's really about the whole context.
Yeah, but I think that's an interesting. If I can just add, like, I find that frustrating a lot also, like, from an atheist perspective, when I see like other atheists doing debates and they're like, oh, well, this line says X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, well, I don't care. Like, you know, there might be some context where it's like it's a different thing, but it's like I almost never approach like religious debate or debates that are influenced by religion about like what the Bible actually says, because like to me it's like, what do I care, like what the Bible really, I mean, it's interesting to learn, but like that doesn't really change my idea of like what how morality shapes the world around me. I'm gonna let my pup in, but yeah,
no, I agree with that 100%. And like, I mean, you've seen me debate. I rarely ever go into Christianity in my debates. I go on morality, and I go on morality from my Christian views. I just don't bring up my Christian views, and I win a lot. So it's good. But yeah, I understand everybody's tired. My wife's out of town, so obviously I'm willing to go as long as I want. But you guys, maybe your wives aren't out of town. So let's go ahead and go into closing statements. And thank you again, too, for everybody showing up. We're getting better. We did better this time. Once again, I'm the host. It's my job to put it on topic. My job to provide everything. If it's not as good as everybody wants in chat, that's my fault. I take full responsibility. I think I did better this episode. I'll do better next episode. I did make the covenant at the beginning of this. I'm not going to fail you guys. So let's start with, well, I think Beth is gone. So, Tyler.
Hey, so my wife is actually not out of town, thankfully, because right before this, I bashed my head really bad and needed her to help me clean it up and get all the blood off of me and get ready for coming on stream. So there's that. Yeah, listening to this, I'd say maybe about 40-50% of some of the things I thought of and wanted to bring up were brought up by other people, so that was cool. The two major line of questioning I didn't feel like anyone else touched on. I got in myself and got at least sufficient answers. I could argue them a little deeper, but it would get a little pedantic at that point. So yeah, no, a lot of what you were saying too with those aha moments and that's happening to me, but it's happening to me off stream during the preparation phase. All the notes you put up, I read through them all. If there's something I don't know enough about or understand, I'll Google it and read more and kind of try to be ready to go for at least the subject matter for a lot of these. So a lot of the times that I'm having those discoveries you say you want to happen, you're just not around to see it because I'm reading what you prescribed for the next episode. So usually by the time I get here, a lot of those moments have already passed me by. But generally, I'm learning quite a bit. I, at the end of this, feel like I'm going to be more knowledgeable about religion than my wife, who's actually religious. And yeah, I hope I'm hoping providing at least a decent skeptical foil for you and entertainment wise.
All right. Thank you. We appreciate you for being here. Ryan. No audio.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I mean, again, it was. I feel like it was like watching a lecture, and it was interactive to some degree. But it's hard. I find a lot of it hard to internalize because I'll maybe because I haven't like sat down and read all the Bible. A lot of the like you're making a lot of references. Conversations are kind of